Judicial.
Also, hold up, Mr. Oliver.
Sure.
Commissioners, what we've done in the past, which I think is an effective way of doing this, we've talked about the clerk's office. She's here to make a presentation, so we can discuss that in detail when it comes up. The supervisor of elections is not here due to training and stuff coming for the election. She has asked if there was any questions. She asked me. I told her I had none. Mr. Oliver, she has stayed inside the board's parameters, has she not? Somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, based with dealing with the number of elections or whatever. So I guess what I'm saying, folks, is let's give some direction per constitutional as we move through. So does anybody have a problem with the supervisor of elections budget as presented? You want to discuss anything in more detail?
I have no problem with it, sir.
Anybody have
I'm good
anything?
with it.
Okay, so Mr. Oliver, the consensus is we're okay with the clerk, with the supervisor of elections budget?
Okay.
Okay. Please
Judicial
continue.
Services, this is within the parameters of the board. It's actually $443 below the guidelines you established.
Okay. Anybody have any problem with judicial services?
No.
No objection to that, Mr. Oliver?
Okay. This is the property appraiser. We don't have any control over his budget, but he is within parameters also, though.
Any questions about the property appraiser? Nope. Okay, let's register no objections to that.
The next one, and when we get to the back, we're going to go through the scenarios in more detail. This just shows on the sheriff's office, they've requested a 14.1% increase in their budget, and we'll go through the various scenarios that we've come up with in the back, if that's okay with the board.
Sure, what we'll do too, is the sheriff is here, why don't we do this? Let's finish, the overall, then we'll let the clerk go, make a decision on that, and we'll let the sheriff have the rest of the meeting, and I'm sure that's going to be the bulk of the discussion, so we'll work from that, okay?
Okay. These are the agency budgets. As you can see, we're cutting back the community agencies 5% per year, which is what was previously agreed to a number of years ago. This is well within the parameters. The Nature Coast amount has moved, so it's been eliminated, but all those are within parameters.
Any questions on the agency budgets? Comments?
No,
Okay,
Chairman.
we're good on that.
Okay. Do you want to stop at this point and go to the clerk, Mr. Chairman?
Well, how much you have left just under the regular administration?
We can go through it any way you want.
Well, well, let's do this, because I think the rest of this is going to be relatively simple. So if the clerk's ready, you want to do your presentation, we'll do that discussion, and we'll go to the sheriff, and then we'll let the board discuss with the rest of Mr. Oliver's presentation.
Good morning, Chair Kitchen, Commissioners, Randy and Colleen. I appreciate the opportunity to come before the board this morning and present the budget request for the portion of operations that the clerk of court, that the board funds for those functions that are performed by the clerk on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners. I have a brief presentation, a PowerPoint presentation. Commissioner Card, in response to Commissioner Kennard, in response to your comment about the $49,000, I have my IT director on his way down to speak to whether those servers are actually related to expansion. They're primarily, it's for replacement of those servers, which inherently typically includes an expansion of space. So I would certainly appreciate that particular option at any time. And on that note, while we are, and here's Chris Webb now. How do you like that when you walk in the door, Chris, pounce on you? I have a question, if you come around, please. May I address this now, Mr. Chair?
Sure, that's what we're here for.
The servers that are included in our budget for the 49,000, Commissioner Kennard had a brilliant idea that those could possibly be funded from impact fees as they are related to the expansion of space for storage and data. Are they just a replacement of a server, or they inherently include expansion?
Yes.
Okay.
So these are replacing servers that are end of life, but of course, as technology advances, these are gonna have more power to them, more space, disk space as well. That helps us to deal with the growing amount of data that we have.
Increase capacity.
Right.
Okay, love it. Thank you. Thank you,
But
Chris.
in the end, it'll be up to the impact fee
Right.
consultant to make the final decision, so.
Debbie Downer, thank you. Just ready.
Hey, that's my job. I'm the grumpy old guy up here. Let's not forget that. So,
That was a
okay.
good one.
Respectfully, Mr.
All
Chair,
right,
respectfully, I say
okay,
that.
Okay.
Okay, so moving right along, thank you so much, Chris. And wanted to just respond, first of all, before we start the PowerPoint specifically, Commissioner Slabaugh, you had a couple of questions at the meeting, I think it was in June, I can't remember, time just flies, specifically related to excess fees and also the line item in the funding that is directly related to insurance.
Yes.
First of all, just wanted to ensure all the commissioners that everything in our budget is legal. There is nothing that we have asked for that is not legally fundable cannot be legally funded by the Board of County Commissioners. Those additional employees are those employees that we've asked for the insurance coverage only are non-court employees. They are not court-related in any way, shape, or form. And they're historically, this actually came into place in 2009, and one of the screens that we have will demonstrate the decline in the official record revenues that historically fully funded all of those employees, plus many of the rest of the clerk employees. In 2009, my predecessor went to the board specifically asking for the coverage of 27 non-court-related employees, insurance only. Their salaries and operational costs are all covered by the fees that we still collect. But that was something that the board decided, and that has continued since then, because as you will see later on this slide, the revenues in that particular area of operations have not increased such that they fully cover all of that, and that's why we continue to ask for that. A good news part of that, historically it was 27 employees, and now it's 17. You know, we've been able to continue to adjust that number to hopefully adjust that out. I don't see it going away in the future, just for the record. I don't see that as something that we would discontinue asking for. I don't know if we'll ever have the revenues that we had in the huge building and boom that took place in 2004, 2005. That's specifically where the revenue stream comes from. In the budget request, I guess we can go ahead and get started with the PowerPoint. Tracy, thank you. I'm joined today by my Chief of Staff, Tracy Phillips, who has done a tremendous job in working with county administration and the budget office in putting this together for you. We're going to zoom right through this because the administrator has already covered certain aspects of it. Excuse me. Our budget is 8.36% increase over last year's operating budget, which equates to a percentage of 1.86% over the requested parameters, and the dollar amount of that is $57,166. Please note that we do not include non-recurring cost in our budget foundation numbers, something Commissioner Kennard has asked for, and prior to that, Commissioner Kitchen for years, and it makes sense. You don't want those non-recurring numbers like that to be basically padding your base budget is what's happening. So that does not happen in the clerk's request. This is a depiction. The next slide is a I don't know how well you can see that, or if you got this PowerPoint from that, but this depicts that additional insurance slide. It demonstrates through the graph the recording revenues and the decline of those, and you can see clearly that we are nowhere near, you know, back to the 2005 numbers of $1.4 million. And so that's how that happens. That is what has happened over the last 15 years. And as well, this is directly related to the excess fees. The excess fees are any excess fees that are of the official records. That's typically what is going back to your county commission. We haven't had any excess fees. The last time we truly gave back excess fees was 2008. Subsequent to that, there were a couple of, like 3 different years, I think we returned a few $1,000s, and those were basically due to end-of-year adjustments that left a little bit of money on the table that ended up having to go back to the board. The next slide depicts the return on the taxpayer's investment for the benefit of the general public and the commissioner's understanding of the duties that are performed by the clerk on behalf of the board and funded by the board. The next slide just shows some statistics related to those operations. We are continually seeking ways to streamline our operations, but as the county grows, so goes the activity and the transactions related to the business of the board. And the next slide is also just statistical related to that. Information technology support, as my director just came down and shared with you, we have an extensive and robust information technology infrastructure, and that is much of that is to support the operations of the board, the budget, all of the financial systems and software, and as you can see, the ones that are listed on this particular list are technology that is supporting board operations. Always like to brag, so that next slide is simply that, to talk about our award-winning financial reporting, which we could not do without the very deliberate and collaboration of our county administrator and the county leadership. It is tremendous. We are very fortunate here in Citrus County to have that partnership and collaboration. The next slides are something requested years ago by Commissioner Kitchen, and something that we keep in place for, again, the benefit and education of our citizens and for anyone else interested regarding the local government audits, making a defined, showing a defined picture of the audits that are conducted by the board and those that are not conducted by the board, those that fall under our jurisdiction and those that do not. The financial statements audit, financial statement audits are the broad-based audits that the annual audit, your ACFR, your ACFR, that's done annually and contracted with the external auditors to do. And then the other side of the umbrella are the internal and other audits, and those are audits that are conducted by the clerk. Those are conducted by the clerk's internal audit department for county operations and also for clerk operations. The clerk does not have the authority to audit other constitutional officers. That does not fall under our statutory or constitutional jurisdiction. The financial statement audits are conducted by the CPA, and this is actually the annual financial report that I should have been referencing. They're provided by an independent CPA firm that is bidded and obtained by sealed bid, and that is on an annual basis, and it contains all of the financial statements of all of the constitutionals as well as the county, including all component units. And then the next one is just also the duties of the internal audit department that are being performed. And I believe that concludes that part of the presentation. I am happy to answer. I don't think there was anything else I wanted to pre-summarize for you on the presentation, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the clerk?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Slabaugh.
Thank you for your answers.
Yes.
And you know that I would never think that you would do anything that you were not allowed to do. I want to make sure everybody understands that. Was trying to find some wiggle room to try to see if there's anything, and I was hoping that your fees could cover that, but I see that
Yeah.
that doesn't seem to be the case, so thank you for this, for all that you do for us. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone
Thank you.
else? Any other questions for the clerk? Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, sir.
So while the clerk is here and we've heard the presentation, is there any board member who has an issue with the clerk's proposed budget?
No, sir.
No objections anywhere on that? Okay, so we show consensus that the board has no problem with the presented clerk's budget. Mr. Oliver? So we ready to move on to the sheriff? Is that where we are now? Okay. The sheriff is here. We invite him or anybody from his office if they'd like to make a presentation. This is the opportune time. Welcome, Sheriff.
Good morning. So should we wait for Commissioner Kennard before we proceed?
That's your call. He can hear everything you're saying, so it's
Oh,
up,
okay.
it's up to you.
I
So,
I didn't know you had
yeah, we do.
the Muzak piped into the restroom.
We do. We spend a lot of time in there, so we don't want to miss anything, so.
Well, okay. That's too much information on a Tuesday morning.
That's right. Oh, yeah. It's going to be one of those days. So.
Before I begin, I would like to thank Commissioners Schleybaugh, Kennard, and Davis for investing their time in this process, to include meeting with me in person and having conversations with me or some of my key staff over the telephone, to learn precisely what this year's budget submission is all about and why this year's budget submission is so critical to not only the present moment that we're dealing with, but the future of our county as we grow and continue to prosper here along Florida's Nature Coast. As I stated in my cover letter to the budget, our county is growing, quite by leaps and bounds, in fact. And the demand for quality services, especially public safety, has never been greater in our history in Citrus County. That's for 135 years, the largest population that our county has ever seen. Tourism numbers have returned to the pre-pandemic levels that we saw back in 2019 and early 2020 before the pandemic hit us. We've seen year after year wealth migration into our county, totaling close to $600 million just in the past 5 years. That's on top of the property values appreciating in a very high demand market that we've seen. However, we have a 9.1% inflation rate that we're contending with right now at this moment. Realistically, it's probably higher than that based upon the impact it's having on our families. But on average, that inflation is costing our deputies, our communications officers, and our support staff an extra $5,200 per year to make ends meet right here in Citrus County. In fact, because of the current inflation rate, it has eroded the purchasing power of our agency employees to the point that some now qualify for food stamps. We have law enforcement agencies near us that are already offering $5,000 sign-on bonuses for sworn law enforcement officers with little to no experience. We have also competition out there. If you have more than 5 years of experience, our neighbor right to the north and east of us here is offering a $7,500 sign-on bonus in addition to a much higher starting pay. In fact, because our little neighbor to the north there, Levy County, is one of those fiscally constrained counties, their new starting salary on July 1, 2022 for a patrol and a detention deputy is now $45,000. And their telecommunicators who are uncertified, meaning they have not received any of the training, that come in brand new off of the street, are earning $35,000 a year. And if you're certified, the starting pay is $40,000 and it goes up from there. Additionally, we have lost 6 deputy sheriffs over the past couple of months to the private sector. All of them left for much higher paying jobs in the private sector. Higher pay, greater benefits. Like we just had one that resigned his position by a text message to his supervisor to go and work for CSX. And I'll quote the ad. CSX is hiring train conductors, $5,000 in sign-on bonuses, 4 weeks of paid training, and then $67,000 average first-year earnings. You only have to be 18 years of age, 1 year of work experience. A GED or high school diploma is not required. None of them in the private sector require the men and women who do those jobs to run towards the sound of gunfire, much less be concerned about whether or not the local government officials truly understand the meaning of back the blue. But those that have left to go to some of the other public sector jobs are going for places like Texas and Phoenix, Arizona, to be specific, that start at 68, and the max salary out there is $105,000 a year. A little closer to home, we already know that all state agencies increased the starting pay on day one for a state trooper to $50,000 a year starting base pay. So that means that a cadet that showed up at the Academy for FHP on July 1st was earning $4,166 a month. No training, no experience, just a little bit of things that they have to go through the requirements to be accepted as a cadet, and they're earning $50,000 a year. And of course, with the money that the governor put into his budget, they're offering substantial sign-on bonuses as well. While our law enforcement recruits that come into us might have the potential to earn that money, the details have not been worked out. But right now, we have a human capital crisis. But before I conclude, I want to go into and address a couple of glaring misstatements that were in the official records submitted by the county administrator to all of y'all when you got your budget on Friday afternoon this past week. Our budget was submitted in a timely manner. In fact, we have a signed receipt stating that it was received at the BOCC offices at 2:24 p.m. So I don't know where the communication error was that said that our budget was submitted late, but it's never been late under my watch. Furthermore, the sheriff's office answered all of the BOCC's questions and submitted answers before the deadline of 7/11/22, and we submitted those answers on 6/29/22, and we got confirmation from several of the commissioners that received those. However, we did not receive any answers back to our questions regarding the list of things that were on that letter that came out, where we requested information for clarification. Specifically, someone had put in the notes that Hernando County was not going to pay their deputies a much more substantive pay increase, but we know that in fact is the truth, that they are going to do that. In the budget letter that came out this past Friday on July 22nd, in a fashion like Nancy Pelosi did with the Obamacare legislation that was passed, that was really a whole case of Xerox paper, we had more than 700 or nearly 700 pages of budget information. And the document has some substantive inaccuracies in it. For example, the document references 30 sworn vacancies in the sheriff's office. We do not presently have 30 sworn vacancies, and under my watch, we have never had 30 sworn vacancies. In fact, our response to the BOCC questions that were submitted to us that we replied to back before the end of June stated clearly that we are at 86.3% total staffing with only 13.6% positions vacant. The number provided was for total staffing, not sworn law enforcement officers. We currently have 13 deputy vacancies, and in that one area, you're correct, Mr. Oliver, we won't be able to fill those positions if we don't do something to tackle aggressively the pay and equity challenges we're seeing, not only from the local agencies that are surrounding us right as on our borders, but the state agencies and those other law enforcement agencies, not only in Florida, but around the country. A couple of the members of the BOCC clearly get it, and we appreciate you for taking the time to analyze our budget, ask the tough questions, and get the answers that we hope have satisfied your questions and your desire to be a well-informed member of the Board of County Commissioners. But clearly, we have to understand the dynamics of the current human capital equation that law enforcement professionals, not only in Citrus County, not only in the state of Florida, but across the country are dealing with. And we've got to get the pay equity equation fixed now before we lose any more of our great human capital that are here. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to get this right, or the hemorrhaging of our great employees will continue. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. Board, any questions, comments? Commissioner Slagle?
Good morning, Sheriff.
Good morning, ma'am.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
You're down 13. You did give me those numbers. I appreciate the 13.66 overall that you're down was about 44 employees, 13 of them being sworn. Now you've just said this morning you lost another 6. Were they all sworn also?
I'm just talking about the sworn that we lost. Yes, ma'am.
So-
Those are, in the past 8 weeks, we've lost 6 to go to the private sector for much higher paying jobs that are far more lucrative. And quite frankly, they don't wear a badge on their chest and they have to worry about getting shot at. One of them's working within a quarter mile of here for more money than what we were paying for him to be a deputy sheriff.
So, we're about, you're at 19 then, 19 sworn with the 6.
No.
No?
No. We have hired since
Oh,
those
okay,
guys left.
okay.
So we've got folks
You're a
in the
little ret-
pipeline right now. We are, our true number right now, as of this moment, is 13 down.
And you and I had a lengthy meeting. You know where I'm trying to get to, and I just today I have a question which really is out of my purview, but I think it would be pertinent for the public to realize that you are doing a formula with compression because if you're going to have to hire these new people in at 55, which the state has set the parameters for you, and you have a 10-year veteran that's at 53, you do have a plan for compression to get those veterans up. Because my concern is, right now, the employees that you have today is the people that I want to take care of.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
And
So-
I want to see you retaining them.
What I would like to do is I'd like for Colonel Farrar to come up and talk anecdotally, briefly, about the challenges we're seeing with the competition that's out there. And we talked specifically about the sergeants, the lieutenants, and the captains, and how well compensated those other communities are doing for those folks at those levels compared to what we've been able to do. So as we worked our way through this pay plan adjustment across every category of our pay scales, we wanted to make sure that there was not compression so that those folks who aspired to those leadership positions actually got compensated for those tougher jobs. Being a squad leader on patrol, responsible for 10 deputy sheriffs, and serving half of the county should be compensated by more than just $1,000 more or $2,000 more per year. That's leadership, and those folks are making decisions for us when all of us are in our beds at night sleeping, or all of us are here sitting in this room right now having a meeting. We expect them to be operating at the level where they can make those independent decisions and do it right each and every time. Not when somebody's looking at them, but when nobody's looking at them, so that whenever the questions come up later on, we know that it was accomplished to the standards that we expect in our agency, but that we're also accountable for by state statutes.
And I'm not necessarily talking about the lieutenants, captains, sergeants. I'm talking about that 10-year veteran on patrol. I mean, let's take care of those people and
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's built into the pay plan adjustment to ensure that we retain that talent. Because I'll tell you, Billy Woods, love him to death. He's trying to steal our guys. We're trying to steal his guys. We have things that we can offer that they can't. They have money right now with this hyperinflation that we're dealing with that we just can't offer. But we've got to come up as close as we possibly can, at least to have us a level playing field with the state agencies, which there are more. It's more than just FHP that got that $50,000 a year start. On top of the way the governor did it, it's a 10.38 across the board for anybody that was already above $50,000 starting pay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else? Yes, sir. Commissioner
Yeah.
Kennard.
I'll go, this is a question for Randy, I guess while the sheriff is up here. I had asked, what capital expenses, or if we were paying for as many capital expenses out of impact fees as possible, or were eligible. And you said that the answer I got back was that yes, we were paying for everything that was eligible out of impact fees. But I don't know what that number is. Do we have a dollar figure on how much of the roughly $1 million in law enforcement impact fees we have?
1.5 million is what I'm being told.
That's for this year for capital expenses.
And remember, it only relates, according to the impact fee consultant, to expansions of services and the addition of new deputies. So if you hire a new deputy that you didn't have before, by new deputy, I mean you expand your workforce, the patrol car, the radio, things like that would be an eligible impact fee expense. But if you're replacing one for an existing deputy, that would not be eligible.
Okay. Now, in our budget book, it says that the law enforcement impact fees that we currently have, I thought it was just shy of $1 million. It's 988. Now, the expected revenues are pretty significant, but I guess I'm questioning how we're paying for 1.5 million out of impact fees if we've only got 988 on hand.
Scott, could you come up to a microphone so everybody can hear what you're saying?
I mean, I'm glad, I want to pay for as much of this capital stuff out of impact fees as we can.
Yeah,
but-
so when I said the 1.5, we looked at that last week. That's exactly what we have right now.
Okay, that's what we have in impact fee money to pay for capital expenses that he's submitted in his budget, that the sheriff has submitted. Okay, great, thank you.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Anything else? Move on. Thanks, Sheriff. Thank you. You said you had other folks to make a presentation?
No, Mr. Chairman, only if Commissioner Schleybaugh had further questions about the competition that we've got out there. I would have invited Colonel Ferraro to come up and talk about what he has heard directly from the folks that are out there dealing with the same capital issues that we're dealing with when it comes to having talent and how they're paying them at a much higher level than what we're doing right now. And we're also trying to compete with that so that we don't lose sergeants and lieutenants, those mid-career to upper-level career professionals that are here as part of our family.
Well, while you're here, in fairness, I have a whole list of questions, but I'm only going to ask you a couple, because I have a feeling I know where this is going. But just for the public, I'd like to give you an opportunity to address these. As you state right now, with the 13 vacant positions, also, over the course of the last budget year, there were vacant positions. What happened with the funding that was budgeted for those vacant positions?
Time and a half salary to pay to make sure that we covered the positions that we needed. We used that to pay pretty substantial time and a half rates for our employees to take on those missions. Because we've been running anywhere between 5 to 10 folks down on the sworn. And then the same thing happens in our communications officers. We see what we're dealing with right now with Levy County. Levy County's starting untrained pay is better than our starting trained pay. And we've got to compete with that as well if we're going to keep those folks in our 911 communications center. So lots of overtime. And our overtime report has been quite extensive, and it's very thorough and detailed in what we're doing to make sure that no position goes unmanned, if at all humanly possible.
And you know, I guess my final question is this, and I've talked about this quite a bit, is about, you know, the budgets, and I know you've heard me say this, budgets are budgets. They're submitted, they're guidelines. What really counts is actuals. And in the past, I've asked on several occasions to see actuals from previous years. So those kind of questions would have already been answered. In other words, if you budgeted, you know, I'll just pick a random number, $1 million for overtime, and your actuals last year were $2 million for overtime, then that would show that, you know, that instead of going to salaries, it went to that number. And it's been very difficult to get actual data. In other words, you know, we hear that you know, and I guess that's the question. If you look at our budget, we'll show you the budget that we had 2 years ago and what the actual was 2 years ago. and then the budget from the year before and the actual from the year before, so we can compare what was budgeted to what was actually spent. And, you know, and the other thing we're and I guess this is going to be a question for in the future, because right now, that question means something. In the future it doesn't, because my understanding, the law's been changed, and, you know, if your budget is 40 million, you spend the 40 million any way you want, regardless of what the board says. So that's the only reason I've asked about, and I know we ran into this with fire, not under your watch, but we ran into this with fire when the budget said we're going to spend this much in personnel and this much in capital, and when we saw the actuals, it was not the case. You know, more was spent on personnel and less on capital, so we didn't get to where we were supposed to get to at the capital. So, you know, that was my question regarding that.
I would like to ask Ms. Suffern to comment specifically about that, and then I'll follow up when she gets done.
I just wanted to say, I've never been asked specifically to see any actuals, so we can print that at any time. Plus, every year, at the end of the year, that is all reported. It's reported to the state in a state report, and it rolls up into the CAFR. So, it's there, you get a copy of that every year.
I know,
So
we get a copy of it, but it's very broad. You know, in other words, it's broad categories. It doesn't drill down into the individual categories.
So have you sent a specific request for that?
I've said in this meeting in front of the public, and I know you watch these meetings all the time, I said, my position has been all along, I'm willing to fund any request for deputies. I'm willing to fund any requirement and any request for deputies. I just want to see from the past years how much actually went to deputies, whether it was salary, whether it was overtime, whether it was, you know, any kind of special pay or whatever. So
We have that data, we can produce it at any time, and we give that to the school board too on a quarterly basis. They get that on the contract because that was an agreement, so it is very easy to send. All we need is a request.
yes, ma'am.
I have asked for 941 report probably 6 months ago. I'll find out and resend it to you, Tracy. I don't believe I sent it to you. I will do that now. But I am curious what the year-end overtime was. That would help me a lot to figure out how to get to where we need to be at.
Be prepared, it's a big number.
I'm prepared. So, but I will send that. I'll dig for it. It's probably 6 or 8 months ago that I asked for the 941.
Do you know
Well, it
who
had to
you
be
sent
around
it to?
January.
Do you know?
I'm not sure. I'll find out, but I will send it to you.
Okay.
And then we'll be on the same page. But I just wanted that I have asked for that.
So, Mr. Chairman, on average, in our budgets, 79 to 80% of every dollar we are budgeted goes towards salaries of our employees. As you know, with high-risk employees, there are an accumulation of things that cost us additional monies compared to a non-high-risk employee. And those numbers are very substantive. So when we pay a high-risk employee time and a half, we are also making substantial contributions into their FRS at that time and a half rate. Additionally, because of runaway inflation in the healthcare industry, this year, instead of what we've contended with in years past, we're going to go to an unprecedented $2.5 million of unbudgeted requirements into our healthcare reserve. $2.5 million. That comes out of that budget allocation that we had last year, and we have to pay that because we've got employees that are on our payroll that have very serious illnesses or injuries that have eaten away at that. So that is on top of the money that we're putting out there for the overtime to make sure that we cover our positions and make sure that we're providing for the public safety here in our community. And what I'd like to do is quote what's on the BOCC's website, where it says, the number one function of government is to provide public safety services such as fire, EMS, and law enforcement. I could not agree more, and I think our citizens could not agree more, and they've enjoyed some really great things. But when we are 18% below where we should be in the number of officers per the folks that are already living in our county, not factoring in anything whatsoever for the 500,000 or so tourists that came here in the last 12 months, we've got to get additional help for our sworn law enforcement positions out there. And that analysis that we did for 48, that we said were below glide slope, next year, when we go back through the budget process, Colonel Ferrara and the bright minds that do all of the analytics are gonna sit back down, and we're gonna have to reevaluate that, because it's probably going to go up based on what we're seeing with our population growth. You know, we all know, because we've seen it, we've grown by more than 20,000 citizens in less than a decade right here in Citrus County. And in order for us to respond to that population increase, in addition to the tourists that are out there, we have to have sworn law enforcement deputies on every part of our community, not just concentrating them at the right time in the right place, to do the proactive things instead of doing the reactive things. And by the grace of God, we've still been able to get young men and women who will step forward, raise their right hand, and allow a family member or one of us to pin this badge on them to go out and run towards the sound of gunfire. To have brave men like that and women like that, that take that oath and take this to heart each and every day, is absolutely priceless for our community's well-being and for the safety and security going well into the future of our community. We can't ask them to do more with less. We've got to take care of those employees. Thank you.
Okay, well, let me respond to that. First of all, you made a comment about some of us don't back the blue. I don't think that is correct. I think this board has a record of supporting law enforcement in our community, and always has. The last year, particularly, you presented a budget inside the parameters that we asked you to, and we said, fine, just like we did with all the budgets up to date, we did that. Okay, so I think to say that some of these commissioners don't back the blue is patently false. Okay, so I just want to say that. Nobody ever said that people that wear a badge shouldn't be compensated. Okay, what I'm trying to get to is what can we afford, not what do we want. Okay, I'm sure if we told you money is no object, your budget request would be higher, because you can always, you know, we can always use more deputies, we can always use better equipment, and so on and so forth. So just as you're looking at trying to do more with what you have, that's what we're tasked with. So I kind of break this down into different parameters, okay? When you came in here once before, we talked about it. What's more important, this or this? It's all important, but what's more important, boats on the water or body cameras, okay? If we can't afford it all at once, what is the priority that we should fund it? What I see happening here, and this is just my opinion, is that we're trying to do it all at once, okay? You're trying to raise your staff to, your staffing to a level that you feel is necessary, plus you're trying to make up for record-breaking, worst we've had in 40-some years, not your fault, it's the person that they put in the White House that we're dealing with, okay? So, so you're trying to deal with that, you're trying to retain people, and I know, I see this all the time in other organizations, not just law enforcement, are fighting the same thing, trying to pay people more to keep them, okay? But all I'm saying is this is not gonna be, hopefully, a forever situation. Hopefully, we won't see 10% a year inflation continuing into the future.
Let's hope not.
So my concern is knowing that once your budget is approved, I don't ever see it going down, okay? So what I'm wondering about is that we're making adjustments for one-time situations, just as we talked about with capital improvements. So this is my thought. And Commissioner Slabaugh brought it up. If we had choices to say, with your current budgeted staff, if you could pay every single one of them the amount that you think you need to pay to meet all the goals you talked about, what would that amount be? Then, if you wanted to add more people and pay them the same, what would that be? And then the non-sworn folks, the people that don't run towards the gunfire, okay? Those folks, what would be the cost of not including them in the pay raise, okay? So what I'm saying is, in my mind, the priority, okay, and this is where I kind of mirror, I think, what Commissioner Slabaugh was saying, my priority is the people you have now need to be paid the same or more than anybody else. That's one. I can go for that, okay? Number two is that you need to be able to recruit and staff the level that you think you need to staff, okay? But then number three is going to be this trying to get everybody up and, you know, any of the capital expenses and stuff like that, that can be phased in, I think, at a later time. So it seems to me that, and again, it's your office, you run it the way you see fit, that's what the voters put you in there to do. I'm just trying to say, I would hate to say we couldn't give the people we have there the money that we would like to give them because we're also going out and hiring a bunch of other people, and we're giving non-sworn personnel raises as well, okay? Because I don't think, you know, that in the public's mind, not saying those folks aren't important, but I don't think they carry the same risk in the job that you've so eloquently demonstrated here today. So that's my thinking on this. You know, I mean, I always look, you know, to say, yes, we understand everybody's position. Where's the middle of the road? Where can we find common ground to say, what's the number out the door today to give everybody that you have right now, plus the 13 you're down, the money that you want to give them, and we hold there, you know, before we go and add more and expand what we have. And I'll just give you my argument. I'm not going to argue law enforcement with you. But yeah, we might be up 20,000 people over the years, but if 10,000 of those people moved into Sugar Mill Woods, I don't think that increases the crime rate. Okay? You know, what we see is people that want these kind of services, but I think for a vast majority, it's law-abiding citizens. Also, the tourist number is no larger this year than it was the year before, and as you said, we're back to post-pandemic. That's what it was post-pandemic. So it's not like our tourist number is exploding off of the chart from where it was 2 or 3 years ago. So I'm just saying all that to say I understand, okay? My understanding, and quite frankly, your job is to come in and get every dollar you can for your office. and I understand that. And you make persuasive arguments. All I'm saying is that we have to say, okay, if we fund the sheriff fully, what do we cut over here that we can't afford for anybody else, okay? Do county employees now that aren't in the sheriff's department give up future raises because all the funding has gone to the sheriff's office? So we're just looking, I think, for equity and some common ground here, Sheriff. So that's my thinking. You might agree with it, you might not. You might say, my budget's in front of you, take it or leave it. And I hope it doesn't come to that, because if it's a take it or leave it, I'll tell you I can't vote for it. But I can vote for a budget that gives every one of your law enforcement people the raise that you want to give them to keep them. So I'll just say that.
So, Mr. Chairman, what I would offer up as perhaps another final concluding comment is we didn't put wants into the budget. We put needs and requirements to serve the population we have here right now, which is in excess of 160,000 full-time residents, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. And we did also add some things to the budget that we brought up last year, because we were trying to help the BOCC out last year and still take care of business. But we knew last year that we had a crisis on our waterways, and that crisis has gotten far worse in some instances than what it was even a year ago. And we could have perhaps used some additional sources of funding last year to get ahead of this bow wave, because now the cost of adding a new deputy sheriff to the payroll and buy all the equipment is 16% higher than what it was a year ago to start out that new deputy sheriff. And that's mainly attributed to inflation across the board, from the capital expenses to the things that we have to pay for to onboard that person, to even buying their uniforms and their duty gear. And if we could have gotten ahead of it last year, we would be that much further down the pike. But again, according to our analytics, we are 48 sworn positions below the minimum staffing where we should be to serve our citizens, which roughly equates to all of them going to patrol to serve our citizens, to reduce the time from when someone makes a 911 call to that deputy sheriff showing up on their front doorstep or going to the scene of an accident. And it's a tough dynamic. And I don't envy you your position, and I don't envy any of the other members their positions on how we go about slicing this up to make ends meet. But the demands for service are going to continue to go up, and we've got to meet those demands, or folks will be blowing up my phone, your phones, the administrator's phone, and we have unhappy citizens. But unserved citizens is not good, because it's a risk to their safety.
I'm going to give you the last word, Sheriff, on this. I just want to be clear, because under all the recommended budgets in front of us, yours could, yours is the only changing parameter. So under the board parameters, the recommended budget, all salary increases with 6 deputies and funding all sheriff's requests. The only one you're supporting is funding all sheriff's requests.
I will.
Just a second.
I will tell you, Mr. Chairman, that having a budget that goes through and has substantive inaccuracies and facts that we reported to the BOCC, and having to go through that, it's unconscionable to ask me to make a comment about that with less than 96 hours from the moment that nearly 700-page document was produced to go through and do the proper staff analysis. Because we didn't get it, we didn't see it was posted until Friday night after 5 p.m. And today's Tuesday morning.
Okay. Okay. Commissioner Slabaugh, you had a comment?
Sheriff, what I'm hearing from the chair, and Mr. Chairman and I rarely agree on a lot of things. But I hear some hope, because I hear, let's take care of what you've got today. And I know you have to think about the future, but the hope I'm hearing is if we can pay your people, the sworn running into the gunfire that are protecting me, protecting all of us, every one of us up here, I'm fairly certain we want to see that. We want to see you pay your people so well they don't want to leave us. And I understand the actuary and, anticipating what we need because of our population. I'm just concerned about our deputies today and how do we get there. And I heard some hope, so I hope you heard that hope too. And we can go, we've got a little bit of time to try to figure this out. We don't have to, it's not you against us, and I know you have your people here, and you've done a good campaign about you against me, but it's not you against me. It's both of us, all of us want to see your people so taken care of, and none of us, I would not hold you back from that. You brought up Marine Patrol. I was one of the ones that I wanted a boat that could get under that bridge, and I didn't feel like you were giving me that. And from this day forward, I want to be able to work with you, and I want your people that you have brought here to know I'm not against you. I'm the poster child for wanting law enforcement. And so I heard hope, and I hope you heard it too, and we can do this. And just have to massage it and figure it out, and I'd be happy to meet with you again and take 2.5 hours more of your time, but I will do it because it's that important to me. So thank you, sir.
Again, thank you for investing your time with us and being the first commissioner to come and meet with us in person after we opened it up to everybody to have a discussion about the budget. Thank you.
Commissioner Carney?
Mr. Chair, thank you. And again, I'm in agreement with Commissioner Kitchen and Commissioner Slabaugh. We definitely want to take care of your deputies. We definitely want to get your the pay up. We want to retain them here. But here's what we're up against, and I agree with Commissioner Kitchen. When you look at the average household salary in Citrus County, it's below $50,000. And we're asking, and those people, it's costing those families $5,200 more a year to survive in these times, unfortunately. The feds are probably going to raise the reserve date point almost a point. So it continues to, so I want to find medium ground with you. Okay, I want to retain your deputies. I want to get them up. So somewhere we need to come to I think it needs to be a 2-year step. Okay, I think this year we need to fund your deputies, get your salaries up. Next year, worry about the others in retaining. So that's where I'm at. But remember, everybody else is suffering here too. And the average salary in Citrus County is not very high. I mean, the household is not very high. And I just am not. I think that we can. In new construction, we've had a ton of money come in from new construction. Property values have soared through the roof. You know, a house that sold a while back for 280, he's now selling for 735. You know, I've seen it. So property values have gone through the roof, and Citrus County's got plenty of money coming in. So again, I don't have a problem with funding the deputies and getting their pays up and doing that this year. But we also have to look at our side of our infrastructure side. And believe me, we've got infrastructure problems here in the county. So I'm willing to compromise also. But again, I think it needs to be a 2-year step. So I hope that we can come to that conclusion. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Kennard.
The body-worn camera program, the capital outlay for that would be grant funded to initially set that up, or where do grants come involved there, or get involved with that?
I could answer.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, sir. You
So,
have the floor.
Commissioner Kennard, what we would prefer to do with that is to not get in the trick where we are supplanting money. What we would like is board authorization to pursue the grant that we discussed last year on a couple of occasions with the board to put in for the Department of Justice grant, harvest that money that we as taxpayers have already sent to Washington, D.C., bring it back down here, and then go full-blown implementation. There will be back-end money that we will have to pay from our budget, but most of that front-end cost is absorbed by that grant. And I'm not sure, Colonel Farrar, is it after 3 years or 4 years that we have to fully pay for it?
It's a 3-year grant.
So it's a 3-year grant. By year 4, we have to pay for it fully. And I you know, easily, we could take that off the table for right now for this discussion, but we would want a firm, solid commitment from the board to ensure that we're gonna have 100% backing of the board when we apply for that grant next spring, because the window is very short. It comes up in the spring of the year, and everybody's invited to go in and throw in against that grant opportunity. And depending on the needs of the agency and the number of sworn law enforcement officers, you can probably be assured you're going to get that, because there's plenty of money in that grant program. They have grant money that never gets harvested year after year, and it just rolls over. So that's a great opportunity for us we could reduce some of that out of this year's budget. But again, we need the commitment from the board to back us up, because we want to do that. And when we've looked at the data, over 97% of the citizens in Florida support a body-worn dash cam program in their law enforcement agencies for, you know, clear and compelling transparency and accountability. We like it for the fact of protecting our law enforcement officers who are out responding, and it's great for evidence collection so that when we go to court and present something to the judge, there's no denying exactly what happened in those instances. And we can also help us, it really can help us with our training issues that we might uncover before a very serious incident occurs. So we would wholeheartedly support delaying until the spring to go out and just, again, we have to have the support of the Board of County Commissioners to approve the grant and sign on to it, and then let us go out and get that grant money and bring it back here. And that's money that all these citizens in this room and all around our county have already sent up to Washington, D.C. that we could bring back.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, that sounds like there's some movement towards middle ground. I know we're looking at big numbers here, but that sounds like there's some movement towards middle ground. Lord willing, I'll be sitting here in the spring when you bring that forward, and I will support it. I plan to support this morning setting a tentative millage rate that will fully fund the salary increases that you've requested. This year, I have heard it repeatedly from a number of sources that we are hemorrhaging quality people from our sheriff's office, and that just cannot continue. So my hope is that we can find some way to get there today, but that is that will be my position, to fully fund the salary increases for sure that you've requested.
Thanks, sir. In the effort of keeping hope alive, let me put this out to you as well, because I think you know the way the board operates. You came to us years ago and said, you need money for the new 911 software. You told us about it ahead of time. And you told us, you know, this is going to be a big ticket purchase, and you need to start thinking about it. And every time we did our budget, Mr. Oliver said, remember the sheriff's request for 911, okay? So I think the board has shown a history of supporting your long-range plans, and I, for one, would love to see such a thing. I would love to see where, you know, you say, this year it's salaries, next year it's this, next year it's, you know, and in 3 or 4 years, this is where I get all the things that I want to be today, knowing I can't fund them. And that's when I kind of talked about the prioritization. I know it would all be great if we could have it today, but if you had to choose between the cameras today or the cameras in 6 months, but get everybody a raise today, you know, and those are the kind of things that I think that, you know, we can really find this common ground to get to where we want to, because I think we're all kind of saying the same thing. It's just a matter of the speed in which we can get there. And I know from your position, you're saying every day costs, you know, every day that I don't have it, I need it. But on the other hand, and again, don't take this as any kind of slight, but this is what we deal with road resurfacing. If people come to us and they say, when are we getting our roads resurfaced, and we say we have no clue, well, then they're not happy about that. But if we can show them the list and it says, see here, next year your road gets done, then they go, okay, I see the hope, I see the commitment. And I think that's what you're asking for from future boards, is if you want me to back off everything this year, give me that commitment to say, when I bring this to you next time, it'll be there. And so I think we're working down the same road here. What I've heard everybody say is that we're fully in support of your salary request. That's, I don't hear anybody disputing that. So, and Commissioner Davis, you don't have anything? I'm going to give the sheriff the final word. You do? Yep, okay.
I have to say I'm very, very concerned about rising budgets for everybody in the county, myself included. However, those who know me well know I don't watch TV at all, but I read incessantly. And I read really quality journalism. And there was a piece that I read that really worried me about the future of law enforcement in this country. And it said that this is a family business. Grandfathers, fathers, grandmothers, mothers tell their children, or the kids and their grandkids tend to follow into the Leo footsteps, yes? And what was so heartbreaking is that I'm so sorry. What is so heartbreaking is that grandparents and parents are now telling their children not to go into law enforcement because of what you're going to jail when you make bad decisions. Some of them deserve it, but you read the papers and it's just like, oh my God, how do you do this job? How do you, right? So I will say that I will absolutely back the body-worn camera grant next spring. Like Commissioner Kennard said, God willing and the creek don't rise, I'm here. Absolutely back salaries and additional sworn officers. I have some concerns about non-sworn salary increases simply because it's a fairness perspective with our own BOCC staff. And I am inclined to support staff recommendation to put them into the class and comp survey that's coming up. So there would be a promise that everybody is going to be treated fairly if they're not running into gunfire under the same thing. I have long said that my definition of being fiscally conservative is to, number one, take care of the things you have already invested in. I'm talking about residential road resurfacing right now. And two, you look for ways to leverage your investments that will pay dividends down the road. If you invest $10 here, it's going to save you $50 here over and over and over again, right? Those are my two, as a business owner, those are my two touchstones on how to run a business and grow a business. Unfortunately, we have not kept up with our infrastructure. And so that the first tenet of fiscal prudence has not been followed. What I would say is that there are two times when it's okay to defer maintenance on assets you already own. One is when your revenue is tanked. So it was absolutely right to defer it back when Duke closed the nuclear plant and our whole world imploded with the last Great Recession. The other time that it's okay to defer maintenance is when asphalt has doubled in the last year. So that's a long way of saying I am much more inclined to support a large portion of your budget request versus the 2/10 of a mil going to road resurfacing this year. We've already kicked the can down the road for 7 or 8 years now. One more year ain't gonna kill us. You are the blue line, and it's not just crime, it is hurricanes, it is car crashes, it is the fabric of our society, and public safety is pretty much job one for government. That's what we're supposed to do. So, what I would suggest is that we set our tentative millage fairly high. We're already going to get a lot of upset people with the trim notices. So let's honor the process of the complexity of this budget and give us time for Ms. Suffern to get the actuals back to us, because I too would like to see those year over year. And then let's look to trim from whatever we set it at today. If we set it high, you figure out what you can live without, and let's all come together at the next budget hearing. We have 3 of them. And it shouldn't all be done in the first one. That's not honoring the complexity of the challenge that we're all facing to try to, my opening statement was, I'm very concerned about our citizens' budgets and about increasing taxes right now.
What I would
Is that
tell
it?
you about the
I want to make sure.
I'm
she's
done.
You're done. Yes, Ms. Chair.
What I would tell you about the family business, you're absolutely right. We have multiple generations that have worked in the sheriff's office right here in Citrus County. We have multiple generations that have worked in other law enforcement agencies here in Florida or around the country. It is impacting families across the board when it comes to the family of the thin blue line. My own son, who spent 6 years on active duty as military policeman, 5+ years as a deputy sheriff in another county, recently resigned to go to a different sector of the economy because the pay was much better. And quite frankly, he was tired of being on midnight shift every 2 months for 2 months back to back. And he had no quality of life with his family. He has 2 small children. He has a 14-year-old that's going into high school this year as a freshman, and he did not want to miss her years in high school. And he is a full-time employee working for the state of Florida now, 9 to 5, but he's also a National Guardsman who still has that commitment, and he's been in the Guard for more than 8 years now and serves on every deployment that the National Guard gets called up to do. He's been on 8 of them since he joined the Guard, and he's preparing for his next deployment right now. So it's a tough strain on those families. And as we worked our way through this budget, worst case scenario, our budget is still a very small fraction of the total investment that we have going on in this county between what the commission invests and what the school board invests. And we haven't seen what the final budget numbers truly are. Until that gets worked out, we won't know. But last year's budget numbers, we were about 4.8% in total of the budget for this county's government operations, which is a small investment whenever you look at the overall scheme of things. And when we went through this number and looked at best case scenario for this year's budget submission, it equated to 69 cents per day, $252 and change for an entire year per head count in our county to invest in law enforcement. We can slice it multiple ways. We can work on some things on the margins. We'll get you those actuarial numbers and tell you how much we've invested in overtime costs for our employees. But one thing I want to caution everybody about when you're talking about pay raises, I mentioned that Levy County, as a fiscally constrained county, started on July 1 paying their communications officers, their 911 employees, $35,000 a year to start. No experience whatsoever. We're not there now. At $40,000 for an experienced person that works in their communications center, that's more than what we're paying our telecommunicators right now. We're paying them $15 and change per hour. that is below the poverty level for a family. And we've got to address that if we're gonna be able to fill that up instead of beating to death our employees with overtime back to back to back and not allowing them to have time to decompress. While they don't get the same benefits as our law enforcement officers, they are equally important because every call, other than a self-generated call by a deputy on the scene, every call goes through that 911 communications center. And not only are they dispatching for us, they're dispatching for fire, EMS, animal control, and then they take on a whole host of other things, working with the state whenever the state watch folks reach into them, and let alone what might happen if a hurricane or other natural disaster befalls us here in Citrus County. So we have to take care of them this year in our budget. If we don't, we're gonna continue to lose those folks. They're burning themselves out from both ends of the candle.
Mr. Chair? Yes, sir.
So in the budget proposal that the sheriff submitted, it shows a total sheriff's office budget of 39 million, roughly 900,000. If I'm understanding this properly, we're gonna pay about right at 1.5 million out of impact fees for capital costs that we can peel out of that number. Is that a correct statement? Randy, I guess that would be for you or Colleen.
We know the number in the impact fees. The capital wasn't exactly broken down. It depends. I mean, what I heard a few minutes ago was is that they were gonna look for a grant for the body.
Right, body camera capital isn't in here. Because I'm gonna get to that in just a minute. My second question is gonna be for the sheriff. I'm seeing operating costs for the body worn camera program at 628,000, and what I heard was that we would be able to peel that out of this final number, provided that you're gonna get the support of this board come springtime when you apply for a federal grant for the body worn camera program.
I just got the head nod from Tracy Suffering, 100%.
Okay, all right, I just wanna make sure. So ultimately, what we're doing is we're pulling out about $2.1 million out of this 39.9 number. Is kind of, I guess, back of the napkin math.
Just a second, let Commissioner Kennard finish.
Nope, I'm done. Just waiting for answers on those two
Okay.
questions.
Well, here's the thing. I don't believe in working numbers on the fly. These numbers have to be perfect, okay, because we have to submit them to the Department of Revenue. So what I'm trying to do is get direction from you all today, what you want, and then we will go back and recast the numbers. Whether that can be done by the end of the board meeting this afternoon, not sure. We'll try to do that. If not, we can set a meeting to reconvene next week. But it's important that the numbers become right, and that we don't, everybody has the same clear understanding.
Sir.
Mr. Chair, well, let's get an answer to the second question first.
It is broken down in our budget by capital, and everything is in here. So the body worn camera total was 683,000.
Right.
Submitted in our general fund. There is a little piece funded by the cities, there's a little piece funded by the SRD contract, and then it's broken down for judicial. So the grant is gonna cover $2,000 towards each camera, and then I think some of the software. So there is gonna be a portion of this cost that will not be funded by the grant, that we will need the board to fund. But that is all in here in the capital, it's broken down. And then the other page breaks down the operating capital and salary for the added 32 positions that we put in here, the 22 sworn and the 10 civilian. So it is all right here. And my estimate of just those added positions is 1.3 million. That is capital that can come from impact fees.
Well-
But that is if we're putting all those positions in there, then that number is 1.3. Because the existing is not new, so we can't take that from impact fees.
Right. And I appreciate that, and certainly with all due respect, I don't see 22 new positions happening. So we're trying to get to a starting point of, or at least I am, of trying to cover making sure that we cover all of the salary increases that have been requested for current positions.
And
then,
that's broken down also towards the beginning. We made sure that we broke it down so it was clear to see where.
Could you, excuse me,
Cover
could you get a
page
little closer to the microphone,
Of
please?
attachment 2 has the breakdown, and it lists salary, operating, capital, debt, and then it does it again, and it lists the expansion of staffing, the new body worn camera, so you can see each breakdown of cost. And then if you look at the new staffing, that's by position, and it's broken down again by salary, operating, and capital. So it's all here, so with whatever the direction is, it's very easy to come up with the number.
yeah, I'm looking at this attachment 2 right now, and the three figures in here for the new body worn camera. And again, just scratched out some numbers. It looks like that comes out to 611, 612, and then down below there, we've got new body worn camera under Judicial Services, operating costs of 16.4. You know, those figures, just rough numbers, if we come up with 628 or whatever that number is, how much of that can be peeled out of this?
Well, if you're saying, if the
Could you get a little closer
if
to the
sheriff
microphone?
is saying to remove all of that, to push it until we get to the grant, I mean, you pull all of that out, but then we're gonna need the agreement for funding at the time we get the grant, because the grant's only gonna pay for a portion. So again, these other things are gonna have to come into play, because there are a few positions that are needed to be added for that program. If we do it in the middle of a budget year, it could be done with a budget amendment, but those funds are gonna need to be given at that particular time. This is for a whole year, maybe next year it's only for a portion of the year that the grant comes into play.
Okay,
So if we're saying kick that whole thing down till March until we apply for the grant and look at the funding then that whole portion could be taken out of this.
okay. Well, I like the idea of taking the whole portion out of there, and then we certainly need to plan for how we're going to fund that small portion that's not covered by the grant, not for an entire year, but for the time period from when the program is implemented through the next budget cycle, right?
Startup capital, of course, is going to be 100% at that time. There's not gonna be a proration on that to buy a vehicle. We have one sworn position in here. Some of that will be all, but then the salary is gonna be a portion for the remaining time that we add the program in.
Correct.
So
And
it'll look a little different. And that opens up in March, and the deadline to apply is in June. So it's gonna be towards the latter part of next fiscal year. So it would be a smaller portion next fiscal year.
okay, all right.
Okay.
And then the added positions are pretty well broken down per each, and it shows the operating and capital. So whatever is the conclusion of added positions, then the capital portion and some of the equipment that goes on the vehicles is impact fee eligible. So depending on the direction of that, then that can easily be determined.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Slagle.
I have 2 points, Mr. Chairman. I was going to say, I don't feel comfortable talking about numbers for this very reason right now. My recommendation is that we go with the higher millage on the trim notice, but that we massage this and get it so that we don't have to be at that higher trim, because it's not the time, the millage, excuse me, because it's not the time. But my ask of you is, if that is where I go and we vote to have the millage to support what you need, that you then gather your group to come back and they say, hey, the reason why it was so expensive on the trim notice is because you say public safety is #1, so this is where the rubber meets the road. Don't beat up on the BOCC because they put that out there, because we're trying to get you to where you need to be. And I, again, have hope, and that would be my recommendation, and that we start working together so that we can accomplish this. Because I mean, you know the time I've spent. I've got your capital outlay, I've got your payroll, I've got 50 pieces of paper that I've written notes on, and my formulas. And so that is what I am going to recommend that we do. Put it out there in the trim, but please be there for us when that goes out.
You have a comment?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Again, I'm willing to fund the salaries, and I think that the BOCC has to live within their means, and I think we can find the money. I'm not gonna vote for an increase in taxes. I believe that we have plenty of money coming in from new construction. I believe we have plenty of money coming in from property values, okay? And I do believe that we can find the money to give the sheriff to get his employees raises. And I think that we need to agree, lay out, this board it needs to give a commitment to the sheriff to lay out a 2 or 3 year plan to get to where they need to be, whether it's 3 or 4, whatever. But I'm not gonna raise taxes on the people today that are struggling to put gas in their car to go to work, that are struggling to feed their kids, that are having to go to food banks because of the inflation is so high. You know, you have the elderly couples now that we want to put taxes on their back to have to pay for medicine and things like that. So I'm not raising taxes. We have plenty of money coming in with new construction. We have plenty of money coming in with property values that we can find the money to give the sheriff to get his deputies and his personnel up in salary. And here's what I'm going to remind this board. We deal with 2 unions, and you can guarantee you right now they're watching, because when we do this for the sheriff, they're going to be coming into the board next year wanting their money also. So you guys have got a real task in front of you, and I don't look, I feel for you, but that's right. I'm not raising taxes. I think that we can find the money. We've got to, you know, we've got to live within our means. You know, Ronald Reagan made a good comment. It's not the people living outside their means, it's the government that wants to live outside their means. They always want to cry broke, and they want more and more and more. And I feel that we've got a lot of money coming in. And when and Mr. Oliver sent us an email out, majority of the counties in the state of Florida are doing what, Mr. Oliver? Staying.
They're either holding their current millage or slightly
Or they're rolling
reduced
back.
it.
There you go. So you guys can vote to put that out there. But again, I think Citrus County's got plenty of money coming in. I think we can fund the sheriff, get the salaries up this year. Then I think you need to come up with a 2 or 3 year program to get him to where he needs to be. Because, Sheriff, if you order boats right now, you're probably a year out. Yeah, so I mean, those are things I look at. So if you order boats today, because just to go buy a personal boat, it's almost a year in some places. Yeah. So that's some of the things I look at. So if we do, you know, I do believe the board needs to commit to the sheriff, hey, we need this, but, you know, that's right, man. I'm not raising taxes. I'm not doing it. It's not the year, it's not the time to do it.
Mr. Kennard.
Yeah, I almost failed to mention this until Commissioner Carnahan mentioned it. The boats for Marine Patrol. That is something, we don't necessarily have to get into that discussion today, but at some point, before this expansion of Marine Patrol happens, that is when we should be looking at using impact fees for those boats. Mm-hmm. If we go out and knock the dust off the Alumacrafts out there to get this program up and running, and then 2 years down the road, that thing dies and we've got to replace it with a new boat, those boats then have to be paid for out of ad valorem dollars, because it's not a new program or an expansion of a program. If this is a significant expansion of a program, then those expenses would be impact fee eligible, so they're not going to impact the millage rate. So a discussion for another day, but I didn't want to let our discussion go without mentioning the boats till Commissioner Carnahan said that.
So, board members, anything else? I want to make a couple comments, and we'll give the sheriff the last word for sure. And yes.
I would just like to know that if the sheriff is willing to compromise with us on putting the plan, getting the salaries up, and doing a 2 or 3 year step, and the board commit to you.
Okay, and you can answer that, or you might hear what I have to say.
You don't have to.
So I will tell you the here and now, the present Commissioner Carnahan is demanding the salaries, or the hemorrhaging of the talent will leave like that. And it's evaporating before our eyes.
Understand.
And that's why we have to get to that bottom line number and make sure we don't have salary compression from the folks that have been here for 5 years, the folks that have been here for 10 years, or sergeants and lieutenants. If we do that, Sumter County, we got guys from Sumter County that hand their cards out when they're at Walmart here, because guys know it's cheaper to live in Citrus County than it is in Sumter County or Lake or Marion. So they'll live here, but their sheriffs allow them to drive their patrol cars over here to Citrus County, and then they go home. But our guys see them out and they hand out their cards, and we lose folks that way. And so We have to address the here and now of that 50,000 threshold and make sure we don't compress the scale. And then we can work on some of the other things on down the road. And we did phase in our budget request, the additional personnel. We acknowledge that we're 48 below where we should be. We said we can't absorb that. The academies can't put them out fast enough for us right now. Between Withlacoochee Tech, CF, and then the folks that might be attracted to come here from another state that want to become a law enforcement officer, because we're doing some things to incentivize them. But still, they go through their training and they get their equivalency certificate, and then they go out and accept the job. They still have to have that threshold salary there. Otherwise, FHP is going to fill up their ranks. They're 300 short right now, FHP, 300 short. FDLE is short. FWC is short. But the $50,000 starting salary is a huge recruiting tool. Plus, if you're new to the profession, they're going to throw an additional $5,000 at you in a hiring bonus. So that's a pretty awesome amount of money. So we've got our work cut out for us. But I can tell you, if we needed to, I could absorb 20 deputies over the next 365 days. I could do that, because we'll get them, because Hernando County now has a law enforcement academy as well. And we're not bashful about going to those other academies and trying to get that talent to come work for us. Because we do have things to offer from our community that other communities don't have. And it is a better quality of life. And we've got good schools. We've got really good opportunities for them to do things when they're not working, to get out there and enjoy these great things. So there are opportunities out there. Mr. Chairman, one other thing that Commissioner Kennard was talking about that I would like to mention for everybody's benefit. So if we delay the body-worn camera program, and we can harvest the capital and the new employees that we put into the budget for that, take all of that out of the budget. That's a pretty substantial amount of money that we can take out. And we apply for the grant next June. We won't get notice about being approved for that grant until near the end of next fiscal year. Could be late August, early September. And then we would start the process. So we wouldn't need that money. It's a great tool to have, the sooner the better, but we wouldn't need that money until like right at the very end of the fiscal year. And if other things settle down, we might have a little bit of elasticity out there, especially if we can hire the folks that we cut down on our overtime costs, because that time and a half money is eating up the dollars as fast as you can get them from the budget. And we've got to stop doing that. And the only way we get after it is hiring more people.
Okay. It's going to be me and then you. You get the
Yes,
final
sir.
word, okay? First of all, thanks for taking the time being here today. We appreciate that. Again, appreciate your office, what you do and how you do it. But let me just make it, and I'm going to just give you bullet points. I'm not going to get into a lot here. But here's where I don't like to go. I don't like to tell you, do this, come back to us with this, because then next budget year you're going to say, well, you didn't let me do what I wanted to do. So what I'm going to say is what I'll support, okay? And then whether the rest of the board goes with it or doesn't go with it, or you don't agree with it or do agree with it or whatever, that's your call, okay? But where I see right now, I think it is an obtainable position. And I'll tell you a couple things. First of all, and I'm just going to preface this instead of closing with this, and I've said it in the beginning, we expect not to be safe in Citrus County. We expect to have the finest law enforcement office we can have, okay, within the parameters that the citizens are willing to pay for, okay? So you can't go out and do what they do, you know, where taxes are 10 times what our taxes are, and everybody understands that, but they expect the best. They expected that with fire. They expected that with EMS, okay? And we've delivered. Where the problem we got into with EMS, just again, going back, would be they said, just give us this much and we'll take care of everything else. We won't have a problem. We gave them that much and they were back a month later going, oh, we need another $1 million, okay? I don't want to get into that with your department. I just want you to say, you told us what you'd do in the beginning, this is what we did, and this is what we can work with. So with that said, I think if the board can come up with some kind of an agreement here, it's something that we can work on. So first of all, I'll work in reverse. I too will not, absolutely will not endorse the full maximum millage today, okay? So I'm not voting to send that out to the public. I agree with Commissioner Kennard. We have plenty of funds to do what we need to do. Here's where I am today, and I was encouraged you to say that you could snap your fingers and this will change overnight. I'm prepared right here to tell you, one, I will support the current increase to your recommended request of every current position that you have, okay? Two, that would include filling your current 13.6 vacancies and paying those to the maximum that you've requested, okay? So I'll support current increase. I will support the filling those 13 positions, and I would think they should fill up fast if they hear you're paying the same or more than anybody else.
I can't wait to advertise
Okay.
$50,000.
Well, this is
You're
just
starting-
my position, but I think I'm hearing at least 3 of the commissioners kind of lining up on this. Also, to use your logic that you just laid out, which I agree with, I can't support 22 new officers. And even if we did today, you're not going to fill those tomorrow, but your budget is going to be funded for those 22 officers on October 1st. And you just said you probably thought you could absorb them over 365. So what I would prefer, this is just my thought, is that it goes back to the fill-in. In other words, you get your salaries where you want them, and then all of a sudden people are flocking to your door. And the same thing will happen with EMS. You know, you're going to get to pick and choose the best of what comes to you, okay? So when you filled those 13.6 positions, by the way, let me know what the .6 person looks like. I'm curious to see what that'll look like. So we'll round off, we'll say 14, okay? But then what I think the way this could be handled is you look down the road and you say, well, hey, we had talked about we might need this, but we backed that up, but I really could use a couple more officers halfway through the year. And that's the way we start augmenting your personnel numbers, okay? So again, I can support that, and the multi-year plan I also support. You know, the fact if you would come back in here next week and say, I want to do this year, this 2 years from now, this 3 years from now. And again, as you know, as elections come and go and commissioners come and go, those can change. And so, but we need to look at the other side too. We're always working from, I like this, we kind of work from our back against the wall. We don't have much money to work with. It keeps us lean and mean, but then also we have to realize that there are things that come along as windfalls that we can say, hey, maybe this is a good time to do that. I think we used some of our Duke money for the 911, as I recall, and we did that. So with that said, Sheriff, that's what my position is that I'm not going to advertise the maximum millage rate. I can't support that. I will support, I'm just recapping here, 1, increase current employees to your requested salary levels so that we don't, I want to hear people are flocking to Citrus County instead of flocking out of Citrus County. Not funding the new 22 positions this year, but filling the current vacancies and coming up with the multi-year plan. I can support that. So that's where I'm at. And sir, you have the final word, and I guarantee we will move on after this and let you get on with your day. So.
Thank you for your time today, ladies and gentlemen. I have nothing further to add to all of that.
All right.
Have a good
Great.
day.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, before we move on, let's finish our discussion with the Sheriff's Department. We've all heard what everybody has to say. Where do we go? Commissioner Carney.
Mr. Chair, Randy, with the current, if we kept the millage rate at the current, what it is right now, where can we find the money to give the sheriff to get his salaries up?
You can sweep the Economic Development Fund and sweep the Duke funds.
There's no other money with new construction, property taxes, property values. We can't find the money with new construction. Just take new construction. How much money has new construction brought into the county this year?
I can't tell you off the top of my head.
Well, it's a big number. It's a huge number, and we're continuing to build. So I think the current millage needs to be held due to the state of the economy. We do not need to be fostering, putting more money on people's back at this time. You know, inflation is still going up. You know, just to fill your tank up is double now. You know, it used to be $60, now it's $130, okay? And people are struggling, you know, and I'm just not going to put that on. We've got to live within our means, and if it calls for us cutting some things, then so be it. But I think, you know, we need to get the sheriff the money to get the salaries up. We need to live within our means, And again, I am not raising taxes because I feel that we've had plenty of money coming into this county with new construction, just with new construction, plus again, property values. You know, I laid that out where a house sold for $280, and it's recently sold for $735. So now then people are paying taxes on $735. So again, I think there's plenty of money coming in here. We don't need to be raising taxes, and it's not the time to raise taxes at all.
So there's a number we need to have by the end of the day. I thought it was 300 and something, whatever. Yes, sir, 32 million or something like that.
Our grant person sent me an email that says the grant effective date for the body cam would be 10/1 of '23, so it'd actually fall into next fiscal year. For the grant to purchase the body cameras, it's a 50-50 match grant, meaning we'd pay half and the federal government would pay half if we were successful. We can use impact fees for our 50%. So I just want to get the correct information on the record.
Okay, Commissioner Kennard.
Yeah, the sweeping the Economic Development Fund and the Duke Fund, for me, are not an option. The Economic Development Fund, remember, that money was there because of this COVID mess. That's one-time money, and the Duke money, at some point, that's going away. That's why we've called it a special projects fund or something along those lines. And we've already obligated some of that money, I believe, to other projects. So I'm in total agreement that we need to fund the salary increases as requested. It sounds to me like again, I'll go back to the 1.5 million in capital out of the sheriff's budget that would be paid by impact fees. The total request could be reduced by that amount and then paid out of impact fees. And the operating expenses of, that roughly 628,000, I believe it was in the budget request, that could be pulled out as well. And so that's reducing that overall $39.9 million budget request. That gets us to not a great number, but a more palatable number. I did also ask Randy in an email why, when this last option was presented, that the millage rate bumped up to 8.3, I believe, 8.3072. Why did the general fund number go up roughly $500,000 also? So if the sheriff's office budget is increasing to fund all of the salary increases and 6 new positions, why does the general fund necessarily go up $500,000 as well?
Good questions. We getting these written down so we can get them answered?
The other question I've got, I heard two of you, one say indirectly and one say directly, that potentially you wanted to look at not putting the 0.2 of a mil towards residential road resurfacing. Is that something that you wish to include at this point, or you feel it's better not to include in light of the other?
Let me just say something here. This is where governments and supposed leaders get in trouble, okay? You have a group in front of you, and they say, we want this. Then you say, okay, we'll put money in for that. Then that group's not here, and another group shows up and says, we want money from this. So you take the money from the group you already promised the money to and give it to somebody else. As far as I'm concerned, when you make a commitment, which is what we did, and let's kind of be clear here now on our nomenclature, okay? We are proposing a slight budget increase, or a slight millage increase. We all agreed to the slight millage increase for EMS. We all agreed to the slight millage increase for road construction. So I am not backing off of that, because I've already went out and talked to the people. And we also have included for the mental health, because we've heard from folks that's important. So I think if there is a slight millage increase that's involved with getting our deputies up to where they need to go, I can support that, okay? But I'm not, that doesn't take the full top of the list budget here, and I'm not falling into this trap where we throw a huge, it's kind of like, let's have a sale, but let's double our price before we have a 50% off sale. Because that's all we're selling to the people in the community. We're gonna hit you with this big whopping tax increase, then you're gonna come back and yell at us, and we're gonna back it down a little and show we listened to you. With, in reality, all we did was not move it up as much as we talked about. So I have never believed in advertising to the public a number that we can't live with. So if we need, by the end of the day, Mr. Oliver, to have a number that we advertise, I want to know what that number is, or wait. Because I'm not ready to set the tentative millage rate that I can't stand in front of people and say, yes, I support it. So I've told you what I can vote for and why. It'll be up to the rest of you commissioners, but we've agreed on those three things. If there is a tentative, if there has to be a bump at millage rates for the, let's see, we're looking at, just so the public knows, 0.2 mils for EMS, 0.2 mils for residential road resurfacing. And let's not forget, that's supposed to go away if the half-cent sales tax passes.
Correct.
Let's see if future boards remember that, okay?
Right.
Then the other thing is the 0.1 mils for mental health. That's what we have put down. I am not backing off of that, to answer Mr. Oliver's question. Then I'd like to know, do we add to that list point whatever mills to fully fund the sheriff's salary request for current deputies?
And
That's
is that
right.
just for deputies, or is that for all salaries? Just be cognizant of the fact that if you adjust the non-sworn,
I know.
you're gonna have some parity issues
I
with
know.
county employees.
My comment was, and I said this while the sheriff was up here, to the people that are charged with running into the front of bullets and guns. Okay, so it's for the sworn officers to get them to where everybody else, okay? We're talking about what the highway patrol is paying. We're talking about what other sworn officers are getting paid. That's what I'm talking about. So my position was fully fund those, and I'm assuming those 13, I thought this was clear, the 13.6 spots were sworn officers, so that would include getting those positions filled as well.
Chair,
So-
if I may, that's percentage, that's why it's a point. He's 13.66%.
No, the percentage was 1.6%. The number of vacancies was 13.6.
That's not what I heard.
Well, okay. Anyway, for whatever it's worth, it was 13 positions that he said he needed to fill, whatever you want to call that. So, because you asked the question, is it 13 plus the 6, right?
It just so happened it was, it's the same number, 13.66% and 13.
Okay. So anyway, with the, in other words, we don't have the numbers in front of us. So
Exactly.
before we approve a final millage number that we're going to advertise, you need to, we need to have some solid numbers here to work. So what Mr. Oliver is trying to get now is what is the consensus of the board, because he's not going to go out and start redoing a bunch of numbers if he knows that we're not going to deal with it, okay? So let's, all of us have our say. I'm going to have Mr. Oliver run down his list of questions, and you're all going to get to say yes or no, okay? Okay. So, you got something else to add to that?
I
Yeah.
just want to say, I agree with what Mr. Commissioner Kitchen is saying, that the roads, mental health, EMS, we set that perimeter, and now we just have to add in and find a real, true number, so that because we can go down with the millage once the trim notice is out, but we cannot go up, and I'm afraid I don't want to short that. The other caveat is, phasing in the unsworn officers that are equivalent to the county staff employee. Because we do not want a morale issue. We already have a morale issue on both sides. We don't need to exacerbate that. So I agree with you. Thank you for being so clear about that.
So did that answer that
We got
question?
2.
Partially, but I'm gonna
Okay.
go down my list.
Okay.
But let me get one thing on the record first. I would note that we surveyed some other counties. We did not get a response back from Hernando County. We surveyed Santa Rosa, Indian River, and Martin, who tend to be our comparable sized counties. And, you know, asked them what they were doing, and that's the reason we recommended going halfway, because they're not buying into what the state's done. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. That's why we recommended going halfway, doing it as part of our salary comparability study to figure out what the real market is. So I just wanted you to have the benefit of that information.
So your original question was,
well, let me start down with this. Everybody's comfortable then with the 0.2 of a mil increase for EMS,
Anybody disagree? Okay, we're good.
okay? 0.2 of a mil for residential road resurfacing, and if the sales tax passes, that comes off, but that would obviously be a future board.
Any disagreement? Okay, we're good on that.
0.5 of a mil, as it relates to mental health,
Any objection? We're good on that.
okay? Okay, the capital things that are eligible for the sheriff will be bought out of impact fees. The sworn officers, do you want to go roughly to 50%? You want to go to 100% now?
I personally, and excuse me for jumping that in front of your board, but I got to give you something to shoot at, right? I personally say it should be all. We should fund the sworn officers 100% to what the sheriff's asked for now. That's my position.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
And again, I want to know, we keep forgetting this, okay? And we're, we're trying to set millage and things like that. What has new construction brought into Citrus County?
We'll bring that back when we
I want to
bring this
know that
list
number
back.
because I'm telling you guys, it's going to be high, and you're going to be able to use that money to fund the sheriff and do some things. So
But remember, under the parameters you set up, you gave a 5% inflationary index.
I understand
and
that.
a 1.5% new growth index.
I
So that's a
Randy,
6.5% increase.
I totally understand all that, but again, I guarantee you that number is extremely high, and we're not even talking about the rise in property values and what the county's bringing in that way. So, again, I just want to know what new construction is because.
It's in the may I?
Just a second.
All right, go ahead.
Are you finished? Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Davis.
It's in the opening letter in our massive budget book. It says 230 million was the result of new construction. By my calculation, that is $1.785 million. And then if we were to do staff recommendation of 8.2672 mil, that's 1.9 million.
Okay, Commissioner Kennard. On the question at hand.
The fully staffing the current position, or fully funding the salary increases for current positions. The only, and I can go along with that, the only thing that I would ask, because they're struggling with this as well, is can we include the 9/11 dispatch employees in that? These aren't, not to demean your 9 to 5 secretarial pool. These are the first line folks when somebody calls 911. Can we include them in the salary?
I see four heads nodding.
Right.
Yes, okay, Mr. Alva, we would include the 911.
Okay,
with
we
the
do
sworn-
not have figures that break it down that,
That's what,
in
if you
that
remember, I
level of
asked the
detail.
sheriff to bring all these numbers back to us, which he's already here, so maybe he's got some, so. Do you want to wait till we finish this discussion? And then, okay. Well,
okay? And I need to know your direction as it relates to additional sworn officers, if you want to add any or don't want to add any.
My position, as I stated earlier, was no. It was to fill the vacancies that we have before we start
Agree.
dealing with new ones. So we got 2 shakes of the head, 3 shakes of the head, waiting for the other shakes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I would suggest, let's do this. Let's fill, I would say, give direction to the sheriff's office, fill the current positions, and if there's a mid-year budget amendment, if we've got all those positions filled and we're able to bring in additional people, then come back to the board with a budget amendment.
I believe that's what I originally
Yeah,
advocated
yeah.
for, yes. Okay? Yeah, just a second, go ahead.
And I think that would be a fair way of doing it, of getting everybody that's currently there, the salary increases that he's requested, the vacant positions, at salary levels that he can fill them, and then, hopefully there's still additional people that want to come here, and he comes back to the board and says, this is what you told me, and I expect you to stand behind your word.
Okay, Commissioner Slabaugh.
we already have the vacancies that you already have that payroll, but not with the increase. So that should be an easy enough formula to figure out. So, because we already have those vacancies we already give that money.
And that's one of the reasons we
So-
wanted to come up
Just, we'll let her make a list of her questions so we don't go back and forth, okay?
So we have not all the payroll, but we have, so it's just a formula of, say, you have 44 vacancies and you want to start them at 50,000, and we figure that and then back it up. It's pretty,
That's pretty easy.
okay, that's how I think of it, but you have vacancy, you already have payroll for those vacancies. So, I'm in agreement, but to fund them properly from there.
Okay, you want to comment on where we are, or you want to wait till
So
we're
we
done?
keep talking about the vacancies. Those vacancies are already approved and already in our budget.
That's what
and-
she said.
Right, they're already there, so that's not something to approve or add, because that's in our budget. And that the salary wouldn't change until 10/1, according to,
But additionally, when there's a vacancy, we're using overtime by our employees to fill that void. So that money is already being used. So for the 13 sworn vacancies and the communications officer vacancies that we have, we are paying time and a half, especially for our sworn law enforcement officers, high-risk time and a half. So that money's getting chewed up through our overtime costs. And as we said earlier, when you see what the overtime is just for this past year alone, it's a pretty substantial number. And there's no elasticity left out there. And so when we're talking about those 13 vacancies in the sworn, there's more folks coming through the application process now. And as soon as we get them in there, we're going to onboard them very quickly. And we'll probably fill several of those, if not, if we get the promise of, a substantial pay equity scale out there for the pay plan adjustment that we're looking at, and we start advertising that, those folks will come and go through the application process, and we'll be onboarding them right at the end of the fiscal year or right at the beginning of next fiscal year. So again, there's no extra elasticity in that money. We're using it to pay overtime costs. And that's what Tracy was so adamant about. Look, we need to make sure that you understand that those 13 positions are funded already in this year's budget. They're in the next year's budget, but at the higher pay rate. And again, when we get the pay scale adjustments done for every pay plan across the agency, that will fill up.
So to answer your question, it's already in there.
right, I wanted to make sure it was clear, because it was seeming as if you were saying we're approving 13 positions, but that's already approved. So
No.
that's not any additional positions.
Tracy, that's not what I'm
Okay,
saying.
okay.
I'm trying to get us close to the millage that we're gonna advertise in the trim notices. And what I'm seeing is, we're about 4 million difference between 8.2672, which is my goal for the trim notice, and 8.6648. I'm trying to get you somewhere in there. We already have that payroll, but we want to pay them a little bit more so that we can entice people and retain. So we have to increase the millage a bit, and we need to get, does that make sense to you what I'm saying? So I'm trying to get us in between those two, because we're just 4 million off, which who would ever say just 4 million, but we're just 4 million off from the Mac Daddy goal to a reasonable goal that everybody's trying to get to.
And then just one more comment. If we're not adding positions, and I can't say, then there wouldn't be anything to pull from impact fees at this time. So that wouldn't be anything to counter the budget submission, because those impact fee eligible costs would not happen if positions weren't added. So just wanted to say that too.
Okay. It's the catch-22. Thank you. Okay, that's why I think it's better to say what the board would like to see, let the sheriff recalculate his numbers, get that back in front of us, and rather than sitting here and trying to, do budget analysis across the podium. So what now we're talking about is, I think, more of a philosophical direction, Well, I think what I've heard us say, fund our deputies, sworn and 911, and pay them what you need to pay them, what you think you need to pay them, and what that number is, they'll bring back to us. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so So where do our questions leave off?
Okay, so what I'm gonna need from the sheriff's office is I'm gonna need what the 911 salaries are, and I'm gonna need to know what the administrative staff salaries are. I just wanna make sure they match.
Okay.
So if we can get that, you know, within an hour or two, we can start crunching these numbers. We're at no additional officers as it stands now. Is that the final consensus?
That's where I was. We talked about a phase-in, as Commissioner Kennard and I brought up earlier, about once these are filled, then let the sheriff come back during the year and say, here's what we're dealing with. Yes, ma'am.
Point of clarification, Mr. Oliver, you talked about administrative staff.
Mm-hmm.
None of us said increase salaries for
Well,
administrative
No,
staff, so why?
well, the reason I wanted those two numbers is so I knew what the numbers were, and they balanced back to the budget submission.
Got it.
But what I heard from you all was that you want to fund the proposed increases for the 911 people, fund the increases for the officers that the sheriff requested, and handle the administrative staff the same way as county staff.
Yes.
Yes.
The only point of clarification, again, that I would put out there is that if the sheriff does fill these 13 vacant positions, I don't want him to wait a year to come back. I wanna see you come back and say, you know, we've got X number of new positions that we need to be filled, that we need to fill, and we need to find a way to fund them. And at that time, those capital costs could be paid out of impact fees. Certainly not the operating costs, the salaries, so forth, but the capital costs could be.
Okay. Again, do you want to wait till we finish our discussion, or you want to comment as we go? It's up to you.
This might be easier.
Okay. I'm all
So-
for easy.
It's in here.
Can you
if-
get a little
if you-
closer to the microphone?
If you
please?
look at attachment 4, down at the bottom of the page for the added positions, if you remove 3947749 and then go to attachment 6 and remove 683,082, that's the number that you want. That simple.
Well, if I may, I'll ask you to work with Colleen Scott, our budget director, to
It's all
sort
spelled
that
out,
out,
so,
because you know how those numbers are put together better than we do.
okay.
And you said
Okay.
attachment 2 and attachment 4? Okay.
We just
Those
need
were
the
the
two
added
of you.
programs, and we designed it that way this year so you could see easily what we were asking for, because you asked for all the information possible for additional requests.
But here's what we need. We need for you and Ms. Scott to get together so that you agree with her numbers and she agrees with your numbers. So when it comes back in front of us later today, everybody agrees on what the numbers are. Yeah, I don't want to get into, well, we gave it to you, it's right here, and that's not what they perceive the number to be. That's what we come into, and we've gotten into this, well, you didn't read it correctly, or we didn't. That's why it needs to be your number, and she needs to concur, and that way we know we're all on the same page. Yes, sir.
So, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm hearing from the board now is that if we remove those now from the budget request, where we've identified that those are not wants, they are needs, we fill up all of our positions at some time after the 1st of October, which begins the new fiscal year, and we know that we're 48 sworn law enforcement officers short right now today, I can come back to the Board of County Commissioners and submit a budget amendment to kick that process off to get us to the point where we should be. Again, we laid this out to phase it in over multiple years. 20 for the first year, 22 sworn for the first year. And I think the second year in Colonel Ferraro's notes was 15 or 10, whatever the number was. We laid it out very, very concisely as the staffing analysis revealed the total shortage that we've got right now based on our population. So, because I have stated on my professional reputation that I deem those essential to serve the citizens of our community going forward into the upcoming year. And we're having this discussion, and we're going through a very, a good discussion back and forth about where can we make ends meet, but also where can we start addressing current needs, not future needs, current needs of the sheriff's office to serve our citizens. So I could see if the budget's gonna be where we need it to be, and we're gonna have that number today, I can start advertising now, and we'll have a line out the sheriff's office door here to start getting folks to apply for us. And we could be filled up pretty quickly, pretty substantially, across the board and sworn. And I'm not sure about communications officers, because of the demands that that profession places on those folks. But I'm pretty sure we can get the sworn law enforcement officers, in a path, to our door to be out there. But that, again, that doesn't address the maritime stuff that we still are getting our tails handed to us on. In fact, one of the commissioners made a phone call this past weekend about some very substantive issues going on in one area of the county. And, you know, it's not gonna go away without having a law enforcement presence out there, let alone the response time. A deputy in a patrol car responding to a scene somewhere is one thing. When 29% of our county is a body of water, a deputy that's not on that body of water where the incident's occurring may take 45 minutes to an hour to get the boat, launch the boat, and then get to that scene. And then by then, you know, maybe the persons that were causing the problem have moved on, or it's gotten far worse, and we're sending one deputy out there in one boat. So it's wrought with challenges, and perhaps maybe a better compromise is to look for how much can, like we talked about last year, when we talked about the maritime operations and how I would not bring my grandchildren to the blue water area of the Homosassa because of the drunkenness and the nature of the people that were there, which overwhelmingly 90+% of those people come from out of county. Although I did see you down there last year on the water, Mr. Carnahan, and you were not intoxicated. You were just having a
Listen,
good day
one
with
thing
your
you don't
family
want to
on
do,
the
they don't need to be out there drinking and boating.
No, absolutely not. But, you know, perhaps if we had a grasp on, okay, we know we've got a significant manpower shortage of 48 sworn law enforcement officers, which is 18% of what the sheriff should have to serve our county today, and also take care of the business of all the transient guests that we come into our county, and tackle the new positions in this budget, which we can, you know, it's going to take us a little while to get the boats. You're absolutely correct. Colonel Farr just validated the numbers today. They've gone up about 20% from what they were last year. And it's going to take us a while to get those boats. And we would certainly want to use impact fees for that funding for those vessels. But to hire the deputies and get that process started, you know, remember, that's new people to our agency, and taking them through the process. You just can't do this right now and snap your fingers and say, okay, you're a deputy, here's your patrol zone, go out and have a nice day. We have an advanced recruit training that we do. We have field training, officer training that we do before we ever release that deputy out there. And we're not going to take brand new deputy sheriffs that have less than 6 months in the agency and put them on a vessel to go out and navigate Citrus County's waterways. It's going to be someone that's got 3, 5, 10 years or more in the agency, and we're going to take them and put those other new deputies into patrol cars working a zone. So perhaps if we can have a ballpark idea of what, okay, Sheriff, here's what we can do to get you started on this path to hire the new folks now, and then if things have changed dramatically from the financial situation going forward, then we come back with a budget amendment. If they haven't changed dramatically, then we go, all right, we're going to squat and hold right now until we can get to a position where financially it's more affordable. But again, it's not a matter of wants, it's needs, and the immediate needs are to put more folks out on the roads to deal with the idiots that drive up and down the Suncoast Parkway at 100 miles an hour and cause accidents, to deal with all the other traffic congestion that we're seeing, that we're having to deal with, on top of the 90+% of the folks that come to our county to enjoy what we've got and go out and spend time in the water, but do cause problems for some of our full-time residents.
Sheriff, thank you. We appreciate it. I'm just going to make two quick comments because I don't want to go back and forth all day long. You say we're 48 short. Well, that didn't happen today. That didn't happen on October 1st. If we're 48 short today, we were 48 short last year, okay? So we didn't, your budget request last year wasn't for 48 last year. So this has been a multi-year thing. As population has grown, it's got to be a multi-year solution. The other thing is at the end of the year, when we do our true-ups, we tend to find $2, $3, $4, $5 million because we've underspent. We try to over-budget and underspend, and we true up, and that's where we find some of the money to buy these tax rates down. I would say the same thing could apply to you, where you'd come in and say, hey, I need to put a couple more deputies on, and I found this money from saving in this department. But see, you don't even have to come back to us for that now in the future, because, and see, that's my problem with that, where we get to see the money that is saved and how we apply it. From you in the future, we don't get that information. You won't come before us and say, hey, I saved $3 million in this area. I'm going to move over and I want to hire more people. You'll be able to do that on your own. So the only reason that you would need to come to us is that if you're going to spend money outside of your budget after you exhaust all your savings. So the only thing I'm saying is that the 22 this year, or adding 2, or 22 next year, or whatever, that'll be up to future boards and the commitment they make at the time. But, I'm going to come back and I'm going to put you on the spot. The number one question you were asked, and I know you didn't think it was a fair question, but your answer was right on. And the number one question that was asked is, today, is Citrus County a safe county? And your answer was yes.
Yes.
Okay? So today, Citrus County is a safe county, and tomorrow it'll be a safe county. You're trying to make it safer. You're trying to make it more efficient, and we understand it. And what we're saying is, to get you from here to here, the way I'm seeing it, it's going to have to be a step-by-step process that we all agree with. So appreciate your, coming up and saying, make sure we get this, make sure we get that. But, and I'm telling you something that you already know so well, and that is we have an election come up. So you need to vet the candidates coming up for election and see where they stand on these kind of positions. So when you move down the road for your multi-year positions and needs or whatever, then you know where you stand with that. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Next question, Mr. Oliver.
I think we have it. We just have to formulate some numbers.
Okay, now, as we said here today, we're thinking we're going to be here quite late today, so those numbers will come back to us sometime today.
We're going to try to get them back, hopefully this afternoon's meeting, but I
Okay.
think you have one topic on the agenda this afternoon. The library rules may take some time. But hopefully we can do it between 4 and 5. If not, it'll have to come back after the public session this evening, but that is Metacrest, which again may be well attended.
Right. Well, that's my point. We're going to be here for a while, and I want to make sure we have, and again, board, this is just my thought. You can do whatever you want to do, but it's always been my view that when these millage, truth and millage statements go out, it should be unanimous voice, okay? It should be unanimous support. Because the last thing we want is commissioners standing up here pointing fingers at each other. And I've had to do that only, I think, on 2 occasions where I had to say, I didn't vote for this. And that's why I tried to be very honest. And I think Commissioner Carnahan did right off the bat, saying he's not voting for the top of the line here. So what I would hope is that we'll come back with a number. And again, I keep reverting back to what we've agreed on. So we know the 3 other things are in there. So what we're going to pursue now is, are we willing for whatever the millage request increase is going to be to fund these requests? Because remember, the parameters we gave out were cost of living, rollback plus cost of living plus new growth or whatever. So that's where we're full circle back to where we've begun. So with that said, does anybody disagree with that? Because we have to take public input, then we're going to take a break, and then we'll be back at 1 o'clock for who knows how long. So I'll start down here, Commissioner Kennard. Anything to add what we talked about, sir?
No,
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Randy hadn't even finished his presentation, so.
No,
let's
we don't
wrap
need
up
to
with the
finish
sheriff.
the presentation. Okay. You all have rewritten the presentation.
Okay, all right.
I like the direction it's going. I would have liked to have included some additional new officers at this point and be able to utilize not only the impact fees for those capital costs, but also start down the road. Like I said initially, I don't see us getting to 22 in a year, but start down that road of getting to the sheriff's office staffing level where it needs to be. However, I will put it out there again that that the sheriff fills these current vacancies and has additional folks that he wants to bring on board, that he needs to bring on board to come back to the board and look for funding for those. I want to see those positions get filled, and most importantly, I want to see these salary increases happen that need to happen.
That's good. I think we're unanimous on that. Commissioner Davis, final comments?
Yes, I'm glad to hear you say that because I thought I was all alone up here on this. I would prefer to add, not 22, but I would prefer to add some more deputies in this budget. Something modest, and then see where we are from there. I understand the come back in 6 months, but I feel like we need to chip away at this a little faster than 6 months, and I don't particularly care for budget amendments anyway. So, but otherwise, I'm on board with everything.
Commissioner Slabaugh?
I like the way we're going. I think that we need to take care of what we have today and filling that gap that we have, and we can address additional 21 people at another time, because we got 44 or something we got to fill right now, and that's not happening. So the direction we're going, it might happen as fast as the sheriff said, which will be a good problem. So I really appreciate, and I'm just going to say it, I appreciate probably everything you said today, Commissioner Kitchen, and I'm so proud. So thank you for that.
Well, your turn's coming next year, Madam Vice Chair, so.
I'm just so pleased.
And believe me, I'm going to be watching the meetings, and I'm going to say, now she knows, now she knows. Okay, is that it?
Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
Commissioner Carnahan.
No, I agree with that. Fill the positions. And let me jog my memory here. What I heard is fill the positions, and then once those positions are back, come back to the board for 6 more positions, and do a budget amendment. So I can support that.
Sounds like got unanimous consent on that. So my understanding is our formal vote then will take place when we get these numbers back sometime today. Okay?
Right.
So even though there's not a vote in front of us today, I will open this to the public. So anyone that took the time to be here today, if you wish to speak, this is your opportunity. If you would too, we're going to time you to 3 minutes. Please fill out a green card before, during, or after your presentation. And first speaker, please.
Commissioners, good morning. I hope you're well. I'm Donna Rummel, Inverness. Okay, the sheriff needs his armory, and he needs more personnel, especially since citrus is for sale to the highest bidder and maybe not the best. And pretty soon we may become a violent city, a county. I'm from Baltimore. I've seen gunslinging. Okay, I'm going to take my licks and get my education here in public, but at my tender age, I do not understand why we are charged for criminality. The most we do is speed. Jail is a forced vacay, and sometimes it's a badge of honor. Homicides and child abuse are a special evil. They belong in hell. But other crimes against adults, animals, and property are different. Make criminals work crappy labor and compensate the people that they damaged and repay them. And let them get a clue of what it's like to lose. I'm not so rare in telling that animal abusers should be not allowed animals again and should pay restitution for their damages. The sheriff is a committed orator, and he likes to compare apples to onions, teachers and railroad versus the police. We may be willing to pay an equitable share, but stop penalizing us for first-time repeat offenders and the revolving door.
A professor once told us crime is functional, but to what end? Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
My name is Pastor Jack Martin. I served the Spring Hill Fire and Hernando County Fire for 17 years as their chaplain. I worked over 1,000 calls, probably more time with the sheriff's department than with the fire department because of the way circumstances play out. Not only, and I agree completely with the sheriff, not only do you need to bring the salaries up to base, but you need to add the added officers. I cannot tell you the number of hours that I counseled families, firefighters and law enforcement, where their families were coming apart because their husbands or wives were working so many hours, and it was tearing away at the very fiber of their family. You have a situation here where I believe if the citizens knew, they would be behind it. I hope that you don't make a political decision. I'll say this, the sheriff has endorsed the candidate that I'm running against for the congressional seat, but if I stood here on August 24th and it was his vote that caused me to lose that job, I would still be telling you the same thing. He's right with what he's saying to you. You need to hear it. There was a call in Pasco County where I pastored. I called from the church, 4 people in the woods shooting guns off. And I called to get a deputy. And they said to me, well, we really can't get one out right now. Now, I'm in a building in a wooded area. I could have been shot and killed before they can get somebody out there. These deputies need to have the wherewithal to have the right number of people in the county. I would tell you that the sheriff is dead on with what he's saying. Maybe the boat and some of those other things can be worked out. But you have people that may be harmed because of you not getting the right number of people into the positions. It's not just about giving them the same salary as others. I live in Hernando County. I see cars from Pasco County, the law enforcement cars, Pasco County, Pinellas County, Hillsborough County, for the very reason he's saying. They would rather jump on the Suncoast, pay that fee, and drive that extra 30 or 35 miles than to work for a fee that isn't good. These men and women serve this county loyally. If I get elected to Congress, I'm going to be behind them 100%, but even if I don't, I'm going to do everything I can to back the sheriff. He's right on what he's saying. I ask you people to think about it. Don't make a political decision. Make a decision that truly enforces the people in this county. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, guys. Nice to see you again, most of you. My name's Harry Cooper. I'm in town of Hernando. You've been bouncing numbers back and forth, compromise here, give a little here. Kind of like a parachute that works halfway down. Let's put a face to it. Each one of you guys have loved ones. In your mind, think of the one you love the most. And then think of going into the hospital and seeing laying on a slab with their eyes taped shut. 38 years ago this weekend, that's how I saw my 20-year-old son that I had raised as a single dad. He was killed. It was in another state. And the police couldn't get to him in time to save him. Where's the compromise? Your loved one is laying there with their eyes taped shut. Where's the compromise? The sheriff shouldn't be coming to you for money. You should be going to the sheriff and saying, what do you need? I know most of you, you're good, honest people. Stop being a bean counter and worry about the safety of the people. A little over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, a drug dealer moved into my neighborhood. He lived about 100 yards to the left of me, and about 200 yards to the right of me was a house that they all congregated. They're walking by all hours of the day and night, finding needles on the street. I called the sheriff's department, and they came down on these druggies like gangbusters. They were arresting them. I missed the time when they tased one guy. I would have loved to have seen that. Homes were being broken into. Snowbirds' houses when unoccupied. The guy across the street, the poor bastard, was out thousands of dollars that they stole out of his house and more that he had to pay to fix it. Sheriff Mike came on board. His guys jumped on it. They arrested all these scumbags. My neighborhood is quiet. peaceful, boring again like it was when we moved here 32 years ago. We love this county. My son is a key client. Don't make this guy beg for money. Give him the money and don't raise the taxes. You're right. The people in the White House, them pieces of you-know-what. I would say Joe in the hole, but we're on camera. The gas ain't up double, it's almost triple. I used to pay $1.79 at the station by the bridge. It was $5 a gallon 2 months ago. And now they're touting, oh, the gas prices have come down. Yeah, to double what they used to be. Give this guy what he needs, keep us safe. His people are busting their ass to keep us safe. Oh, I think
Thank
I've
you.
been hook and gong.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Next speaker, please.
How you doing? I'm Ken Walters, and from what I understand, everybody's in agreement with raising the deputy salaries and filling the 14-person gap. Is that pretty much done?
We hear you, sir.
Okay.
Bless you.
There was a question about increasing the number of deputies out there. Commissioner Carnahan says you're not going to raise taxes, but that's your decision. You know, as a voter, a homeowner, taxpayer, that should be my decision whether we want taxes raised, you know, to enable the sheriff to hire more deputies, right? You haven't put that before the taxpayers.
You, go ahead and state your questions, and
Well,
then we'll answer when you're done.
No, I'm stating a point. Basically, if we, the taxpayers, want more deputies out there in Citrus County to keep Citrus County safe, that should be our decision if we want to, if we agree to pay more taxes, right? Nobody's saying anything.
I told you, ask your questions. When your time's expired, then whatever the commissioners want to respond to, they will.
Okay. Well, I guess my question is, why don't you ask the taxpayers whether they're willing to pay more taxes to hire more deputies? That's my question.
And you can stand there until it blinks, but we're not answering it until you sit down. So that's
Until
what
I
I've been.
sit down?
That's what I've been trying to explain to you. When your time's expired and everybody has spoken, then we'll answer everybody's questions.
Okay, all right. Well, that's all I have to say.
Okay,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at this time?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am here representing the Homosassa.
Can you give us your name?
Oh, sorry, Diana Finnegan, Homosassa, Florida. Frank Cappucci could not be here today and has asked for me to read something on his behalf for the Homosassa River Alliance and the Blue Water area. Frank says, "We all know that any law or ordinance without enforcement is not effective and may be considered by many as no law or ordinance at all. In order to ensure the safety and peace of the citizens of Citrus County, its neighborhoods, roads, and waterways, we must have quality and quantity within our law enforcement ranks. Without the number of officers and proper equipment, Citrus County citizens cannot expect law enforcement to keep up with the rapid growth of the county and the disrespect for our laws which will follow. Please consider fully funding the sheriff's budget request. Frank Cappucci." And just my 2 cents, Commissioner Carnahan, I think you're right on. I think there's been a lot of new growth money, and I think that we can accomplish what the sheriff wants without raising the millage rate at all. And I feel like the sheriff has the onus of protecting us. He does not have the onus of the millage rate. I don't think it's right that it would be expressed to taxpayers that he wants to keep our deputies here when there's an exodus of them currently, and that it would be his budget that's increasing the millage. I think the money's there. I've reviewed last year's budget and this year's proposed budget. When we talk about transparency, it's not all very transparent. And we are putting a lot of money into bringing tourists here and for economic development, which is great, but we can't not have our people safe at the same time. $4 million, this proposed budget, $1 million over what it was last year, just to bring in tourists. And when we talk about transparency, a line item on that is just $1 million for special projects, and there's no explanation. And I'm sure there's all good explanations, but when we're talking about budget and transparency, we need to look at the full budget and not just the sheriff's. Just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak at this time?
Hello, I'm Elaine Clyde of Lecanto, and I'm here to support the sheriff in his quest to get the deputies that he needs. The sheriff's office is amazing. I'm so grateful for all that they do. My neighbor was lost and found in the woods. She almost died. They were right there because someone heard her call. And I would like that to remain the standard because we need, especially with our elderly. And we have an influx of people coming into this state, and we could really probably get a lot of revenue from all the speeders. And I think less road resurfacing, because, you know, when I was a kid, we grew up watching Dukes of Hazzard, and if you saw a pothole, you'd go, yeehaw, and it was kind of fun. So I'd rather support our sheriff and get the needs met there, and make sure the citizens of our county remain safe, especially as we grow. And I want to thank you all for sitting up there and making the decisions. God bless you.
Thank you. Is anyone else to address the boards this time? Anyone else? Third and final time. Okay, I'm going to close public input. Commissioners, before you respond, if you wish, I'm just going to respond to one thing. The gentleman asked, put it to the taxpayers. That's what happens every 4 years. Okay, citizens vote for commissioners who represent their points of view, so we don't do a referendum on everything that comes on the agenda. I'll tell you specifically what the people that I talk to say, and they support the sheriff as well, but let's have one before the other. When the sheriff says he doesn't have enough people because he can't pay them enough, let's pay him what everybody else gets paid, and then if he doesn't have enough, that isn't the problem. If he does have a line at the door and we fill all those vacant spots, then come back and talk to us about a tax increase for more. So I've heard it plain and simple. They want good law enforcement, but they want to, it's the same old thing, trust but verify. We'll pay the deputies what we need to pay them, see if we can keep them, see if we can fill all the empty spots, then we'll talk about raising taxes for more deputies. That's the best answer I can give you. So, anybody else want to respond? Commissioner
Yeah, I'll go
Carnahan.
about there. And again, the reason I say that we don't need to raise taxes because we have a ton of new construction that's already come. Property values have skyrocketed. So I feel that we have the money coming in to fund the sheriff and not raise your taxes. So it's a two-way, it's a two-way street, and so that's where I'm at with it. Again, we always want to cry. Government always wants to cry broke so they can tax you more, and I'm not. I'm a conservative Republican, always have been, and I always will be. And so I'm going to look out for everybody when it comes to paying taxes. And again, so that's my reasoning is. I feel that I can save you money and plus fund public safety with what we already have.
Mr. Slabo, any comments?
Yes, it's question number one you answered. Do the taxpayers want to pay more taxes? It depends on who you ask. We just had 3 people up here. 2 said yes and 1 said no. So just depends on who you ask. I agree with both. The board set parameters for the millage, and if you look at the statement that we need to look at the full budget, not just the sheriff's budget, well, that's kind of an incorrect statement because on page 9 it explains it very clearly what the board has set for millage and to give the full funding for the sheriff, what the millage would be. So, to just make that statement, we need to look at the full. I can guarantee you that I have spent hours and hours on this full budget, so I don't even know what to say because we all want to get where everything we've discussed for hours, roads, mental health, public safety, that's where we need to be.
Animal shelter.
Animal shelter, that's where we need to be. But you can ask 10 different people and you get 10 different opinions. So it's our job to look at the full budget and figure it out, and today, I think we're doing great things moving forward, and to make sure that our deputies are taken care of, and thank you.
Commissioner Davis.
I would just like to say that I do think the budget is very transparent, and to address Ms. Finnegan, the Tourist Development Council money is what you're talking about. That is entirely gated. That is a 5-cent hotel tax, and it cannot be used for anything other than putting more heads in beds. So you need to be careful when you talk about TDC funds and anything to do with regular budget. So, and I don't believe that new growth can entirely pay for itself, quote unquote. We have to have an expansion of services across the whole county to deal with additional population. And I trust the budget that Ms. Scott and her team has put together.
Okay, Commissioner Kennard.
I have nothing to add.
Okay, Mr. Oliver, you left out a substantial amount of papers that you spent a lot of time working on. Basically, the county has come in under the board's parameters. Is there anything that you want to bring to our attention that we haven't talked about
No,
today?
we'll make the adjustments that I heard this morning, and if I can ask Tracy Seffron to meet with Colleen Scott after the meeting's over to make sure we're pulling the same numbers and we understand that, I'd appreciate it.
Can you also then create another spreadsheet like this one?
We will.
And what I would like to see is current budget, the current millage
Sure.
and revenue. Then I guess what we're talking about is what your recommended budget was, and now we're looking at budget per today's discussion, right, which would include those things. So I'm sure the recommended budget and the board parameters included those other three items we already talked about, correct?
The recommended budget included bringing the sheriff's deputies basically halfway.
Okay, so don't include that, but the board parameters included the.
You want the board parameters?
Yeah, no, let's just go back to where we're at. Let's go, well, yeah, the board parameters is what we sent out. Your recommended budget is what came back, right? So.
We gave you all of them.
Right. So what we're looking for now is current millage, board parameters millage, and millage per today's discussion and
That's fine.
adjustments to the sheriff, right? That's what we're looking at, board, tonight?
Yes, sir.
So we're gonna
That's fine.
decide, keep it where it is, go up with our parameters, or increase the salaries. Yes, sir, Commissioner Kennard.
Yeah, I do have a couple questions. I would like to get the question answered about raising the general fund $500,000 when the sheriff's budget goes up. And also in our budget book, on page 472, there is, let's see, there's a department number 9999, reserves and transfers. And I'm just looking for an explanation for how we went from 2021 actual from 8.9 million to 2022 budgeted 26.7 million.
We could do that. Okay, any other questions anybody wants?
Anything else you wanna see come back when this comes back in front of us?
I'd like to know how he found 472 page.
So, okay, so Mr. Oliver, any questions for us? Think you
No,
got the
I
direction
think we
you
have the
need?
direction we need.
Okay, we heard from the commissioners, we heard from the public. We'll come back, we'll have more discussion about this afternoon. I see no further business. Our next upcoming meeting is at 1 o'clock today. That will be a regular meeting, and we will be adjourned until,
That will be recessed.
excuse me?
Recess. If you're going to vote later, then we would want to recess the meeting.
We have to recess, not adjourn. It's
Oh,
a
because this is
recess.
coming back?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay,
correct.
we'll recess till 1 o'clock. Okay, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, we are reconvening. We have adjourned the regular board meeting. We are now reconvening our previously held meeting that we were in recess, and this was for the preliminary budget hearing. We left off with asking staff to go back and crunch numbers from the sheriff based on the board's direction. Mr. Oliver, what have you all come up with?
Yes, let me tell you what we came up with. We were hoping that the sheriff's office would work hand in hand with us to develop these numbers. Unfortunately, that didn't happen.
How did we get these numbers?
We gleaned them from the information that we had and what was sent, and I think we've done the best that we can based on the information that was sent.
So for the record, we did request specifically this information from the sheriff.
We did.
And the sheriff did not supply it.
They did
So
not.
we're gonna end up with exactly what I said, that if we pass anything tonight, he's gonna come back and say, you didn't get those numbers from me. So I just want that on the record, because I heard tonight, you didn't ask for it, you didn't ask for it, and we asked for it, and we didn't get it. So we're dealing with our numbers that we've taken from the information they've given to us. Is that correct? Okay,
That's
so I just want to base this on these numbers, because the sheriff very well may come back and argue against these numbers, but we have to work with what we have. So, with that said, tell us what you've come
Let
up
me
with.
tell you what the caveats to these numbers are.
Okay.
The 21-22 budget was $3,146,387. Based on what you all told us this morning, the sheriff's revised budget is $35,081,153. This includes increases for sworn and dispatch personnel as requested by the sheriff. Other positions received, the percentage increases is the same percentage increases as the BOCC. This was based on the best information available. Non-sworn and EMS employees, E911 employees, human services, financial services, facilities, victim resource, advocate, community services, animal control, professional standards, emergency management, IT, records, IT assurance, and IT crossing guards were considered administrative personnel. It also includes no expansion of the level of service or increase in deputies or staff support.
I thought we said 911,
We gave them.
I thought they were supposed to get the same increase.
We gave them the 911, that should be EOC. I'm sorry.
EOC, not E9,
Yes,
E9,
that should be
okay.
EOC.
Okay, so EOC, not E911. Okay,
That is
good.
correct, it should be EOC.
Okay.
Okay, if you go to the page 2 to address Commissioner Carnahan's question, we ran these numbers back. Our current millage is 77623. Rollback would have dropped that millage to 72545. Rollback millage takes into consideration all the new growth and assumes you get the same amount of money as you did last year. The board parameters were 5% plus 1.5 for growth, which turns into 0.3627 mils. The BOCC indicated they wanted to do 2/10 this morning for EMS, a 0.5 tenth for mental health, and 2/10 for additional road resurfacing for 0.45. Putting the sheriff's numbers in here makes it 0.1786. Total revenue then is just short of $100 million. And this is the adjusted millage rate. The millage rate over the current millage rate increase is 0.4835, and over the rollback millage rate, it's 0.9913.
Okay, so just for clarification, I think we all knew that we couldn't go to actual rollback. We've always said rollback plus our parameters, which was the ones that we've added on. So the only other thing to deal with is the addition of what the sheriff's asked, or what we have agreed to today with the sheriff, which is the 0.1786. So if I read this correctly, Mr. Oliver, current millage 7.7623, and if we go with what the board laid out today, we're at 8.2458. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, millage increase over current millage is 0.4835. So
That is
we're
correct.
less than half a mil increase from our current millage rate, which would hit all of the things that we said were important, plus giving all the sworn officers and 911 folks raises, correct?
That is correct, and we would ask that if you want to adopt these, that it be done by each of the categories on the left with the millage, the adjusted millage rate on the right.
Okay, so before we go any further, let me see if that's okay. I'll throw in my 2 cents, because I started what I said I could support and what I couldn't. I can support this. Less than a half a mil I think is reasonable when you consider we are responding to everything the citizens asked for: mental health, EMS, and they said that they wanted their deputies paid as much or more than anybody else. So I think those are citizen requests, and at less than $500,000, I can live with that. So that's my position. Anyone else? Yes?
Okay, I was listening to you, I was digging though. Randy, you're at 8.2458, but in the, I know everything's been juggled around, but you had a recommended budget 8.2672. So can you please just explain to me why it went down to 0.2?
No, you said it was 8.26, you said?
Yeah, you had.
It's 200, that's 200ths of a mil.
Yeah, on page 9 of the budget.
Well,
Once again, folks, I appreciate you guys putting this together in the middle of the night after a long day of being up here. Would have been much easier if the sheriff would have said, here's how much I need, and then we could have said, okay or not, you know, but, yeah. So we're waiting for specific answers. Let's
remember, Commissioner Slayball, that the recommended budget included 6 new deputies. Those you all eliminated, so therefore that money was moved over to salaries.
So in this parameter recommendation,
Because the 6 new deputies were how much money? I don't. Yeah, but we were doing 6 in the current year.
well, I trust y'all. I do. You're amazing. I just am confused. So.
No, as I say, our recommended budget suggested going up half the way on the deputy salaries, but adding 6 additional officers. You all eliminated the 6 additional officers, so that went to salaries. That is what you gave direction this morning.
Yes. Okay.
make sure you understand it,
I
Commissioner
do,
Slayball, because I'm just saying, this is the main purpose of your job, right here in front of us.
Yes,
so make sure you
absolutely. And I'm afraid that I'm just so tired, I'm not absorbing what you're saying.
Well, this is what I want to come back to. That's what I'm saying. Instead of getting down in to this, we need to come back to what we talked about, okay? What the direction we gave the staff was go bring the numbers back to us that does this, okay? Correct me if I'm wrong. What we said was we want to roll back plus cost of living plus the board's priorities, which were, and again, we know what they were, roads, EMS, what am I forgetting? Mental health, okay? Then we came back and said, okay, we're gonna fund current deputies to the maximum 50,000, whatever it was the sheriff wants to pay them, and fund for the 13 positions that he's out for that amount too, up to that full amount. That's what this budget should include, correct? That's what we all agreed on. Yes?
And that number is 50,000 per deputy?
With their built-in overtime, it's a little higher than that.
It's not for us to determine what the deputy gets paid. The sheriff said he wants to pay his deputies the same or more than anybody else in the state gets paid. That's what we asked him to do. So if our deputies don't get paid the same or more than everybody else in the state, that wasn't our choice. We asked him for the number to do that. And that's what I thought was coming back. So that is supposed to be in the budget, right? Yes, ma'am.
We are all tired, and I know staff must be tired, and I trust Colleen, I trust you. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around how the millage would go down from the recommended 8.2672 if we are increasing not only current deputies, but 911 to the level that they are asking for.
You just explained
and
it.
only saving 6 phased-in new deputies that you put in the recommendation, so I'm having a
Gotta
hard
turn your
time.
mic on.
You gotta turn your mic
wrapping
on.
my head. I'm sorry. I didn't even turn it off. I have a hard time wrapping my head around how that math could be possible.
The 6 deputies were 620,000, including benefits, I believe.
You got rid of the new positions and just moved that money over to the salary increases for current ones.
Right.
So
I,
you
I totally understand that. I'm just saying that that doesn't necessarily
Yeah, but
ring
Yeah.
correct in my head, but
Because also remember, the original sheriff's budget included the 6 new deputies and everything else, right? And we said,
I'm talking
Right.
about what staff recommended
Right.
were lower than what staff recommended, and that's the part that I'm having a hard time.
Well,
wrapping my
staff
head.
recommended the increase of 6 deputies.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, and those 6 deputies you all struck out this morning.
I understand that, and I understand that that money moved to increasing salaries, not only for current deputies, but also 911, and that doesn't sound like a cost savings to me. That sounds
well,
the
we were
same
able
or
to,
more.
we were able to, what you're saying is it saved some. It was less expensive doing that than funding all the new positions,
If
right?
you're comfortable that you got the math right, then I'm good. I'm just saying it doesn't sound right.
And Commissioners, while they're conversing, here's the question before us. The pennies don't need to be worked out tonight. The millage rate does.
Right.
So the only thing we have to set tonight is what I see in front of us is correct, is that we'd be looking to advertise a maximum millage rate of 8.2458. Is that correct?
That is
That's
correct.
the bottom line for tonight.
That's
If
right.
you want to delve into the, how did this happen, how did that happen, we have time to do that. Yes, sir.
I've got just one quick question before we go down that road. We do have a column here that says the sheriff's revised budget that is 300 and change over what the BOCC revised is. What's the difference there? There's $200,000 between what his revised was versus the
These
BOCC
include all the
revised.
salary increases.
Where is he looking?
I don't know what you're pointing at.
What? Yeah.
Is it the first sheet, page 51 that we
Yes,
passed out
yeah,
tonight?
the center column there, it says, sheriff revised, well, it says budget,
That
and sheriff
included all the
revised,
salary
and then
increases.
BOCC revised.
That include, the sheriff revised included all salary increases for non-sworn people and 911 people.
Okay, all right. Well, the 911 are,
The 911 are included, the sworn are included, but the ones that I read, the non-sworn employees that I read off are not included. They got the same increase as county employees, is what we
Okay.
proposed.
okay. The others are getting raises, but at the same level that the rest of the county employees are.
That is correct.
Okay.
That's what is proposed, is based on the data that was, we could glean from the backup.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Commissioner Davis, anything else?
I'm just concerned if we don't go with the millage that was the original staff recommendation, if there has been a mistake, we got nowhere to go. But I will do whatever the board's pleasure is.
I'm a little concerned about that. I'm very concerned about that, actually. And we can go down, but we can't go up. And I'm very comfortable, I know it's just, but the 8.2672, I'm very comfortable with.
You're only talking 200ths of a mil.
I know, I know.
And 200ths
but
of a mil is, oh, wait a second.
A million?
Nope.
A mil is, a tenth of a mil is $1 million. So,
So you're talking about 200,000.
Okay.
Which is roughly the discrepancy between our budget and the sheriff's.
yeah, you're,
Well, then, I know it's only $200,000, but I'd rather be safe than sorry, and
in a
Well,
$100
if I may-
million
if I-
budget, that's a rounding error.
If I may, Commissioners, this is back on the sheriff. Okay? If there's a $200,000 discrepancy that shorts him or gives him more or whatever, that's up to him to come back. Once we adopt this millage rate, he's gonna have to live with inside that, okay? And we've given every opportunity to that be addressed tonight. So, you know, I don't know, we can sit here all night and hope the sheriff comes in and tells us why his numbers aren't coming up or why he wouldn't give us this information, but our job tonight is set the tentative millage rate. I'm very, I'll tell you this, for getting me to go that's a lot of arm twist on my part, but I can deal with this because I heard loud and clear from the citizens, they want the deputies we have now to get these raises, okay? So I can support that. Plus, we've already agreed we're not taking anything off the table that we currently agreed to, and that's gonna require a 0.4835 increase. That's my limit. I mean, you don't need me to pass it, but that's as low as I can be comfortable with.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
You are comfortable with the 8.2458?
8.2458 as presented. Yeah, that's what comes back to the number we just talked about.
Then you've sold me.
Okay, all right. So,
And I'm buying a lottery ticket.
okay,
This is what it is.
it's up to you now, because,
Well,
I mean,
I would rather keep the millage rate the same.
I know you would, but we're stuck with,
I know.
these raises gonna be
Listen,
expensive.
We made a deal this morning, and we're gonna, I'm sticking to the deal.
Yep.
Okay? I mean, I don't have an issue with that.
Me neither, and like I said, I can go to the public and sell a less than a $500,000 increase because we're giving them the 4 things that they said were crucial to them that they wanted, so I can deal with that. So, with that said, Mr. Oliver, as soon as we get Commissioner Davis back, walk us through the motions you need tonight. Okay.
Why do we gotta vote by category?
Because that's the way it's set up on the trim.
Okay.
Based on what we heard this morning and based on the computations we've done, we would ask that you set the general fund millage at 6.5057, the transportation millage at 0.7860, the health department millage at 0.0614, library services at 0.3147, fire rescue at 0.5780, and with the total millage being 8.2458. Barb, did I do that right? Oh, she went home. Okay.
So that's the motion we're looking for, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, somebody care to make that motion? To accept the tentative millage rates for 22-23 as stated by the county administrator? I'll make that motion.
Oh, I'm
Is there a
sorry, I'm
second?
sorry. Yes, second.
Okay, so I make the motion, second by Commissioner Slaybaugh.
And I just have one question.
Yeah, absolutely. What's,
The
yes.
sheriff, then millage increase, or the millage for the sheriff is 0.1786? Okay. Just want to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on that motion? Because I think there's several more that we have to do, right? We have to talk about, it's not the way we've done it before. There's a whole list of acronyms we're supposed to read. What's
That
that?
comes in September.
So this is all you need now for the, this is all you need for the trim. That's-
And then we have to authorize us to fill out the trim notice to reflect it.
Okay, so we'll do this vote first. So, we have that motion. Is there anyone here from the public that wishes to speak on that motion?
We wore them out.
What a trooper back there, what a trooper, okay. Okay, all right, and this gentleman's pretty interested in how this vote's gonna go, I'm sure, okay, so, with that said, no further board discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Very good, board, a lot of hard work, but we got there. Now, what do we need?
We need authorization to fill out the trim notice to the Department of Revenue.
Anyone care to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, so Commissioner Kennard makes the motion to give authorization to fill out the trim notice. And and Commissioner Davis second that. Is there any public comment? Any further board discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That passes unanimously. Mr. Oliver, any other motions, any other action? Once again, folks, well done, well done. I mean, this is not the way to do it, but it's sometimes, well, they say sausage in law, you don't want to see made, you know. You don't wanna, so, thank you, board members. We now will adjourn our special budget hearing meeting.
Thank you. Good job. Good job.